Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for the second installment of unraveling the newly released DOJ Epstein files. And today, it's going to get real, okay? It got real for me. We're going to go deeper. In the previous installment, we used Epstein's very valued girlfriend, Karina Shuliak, as a framework for exploring his various activities and connections in the years after his arrest and sentencing for his initial crimes. We are actually going to stray away from that framework for today's episode. We'll come back to her, but we're going to focus today instead on the world that Epstein was moving through and the people who were already there when he arrived. We're going to call out more people today, bigger people, all right? I kind of did the first installment as like a test. How receptive were you guys going to be to it? How much pushback was I going to get from the audience? Were there going to be, people making weird threats or comments in my email, like when I covered another well-known group of people? But I think it's time, if we want to call people out, we need to really start throwing out those bigger names. Because if the first installment was about proximity, like who Epstein was closest to, who he trusted, who remained loyal, who helped him behind the scenes as like underlings, then part two is about infrastructure, the systems, the networks, the rooms where influence is traded, where policy is shaped, and where some of the most powerful individuals on the planet intersect. If there's one thing I've learned, they all do intersect somewhere, okay? You might have to look hard to find where they connect and how they're all related, but come to find out they kind of are. So we're going to step back and look at that broader ecosystem, organizations like the World Economic Forum, where conversations happen at the highest levels about global coordination and the future of human society itself. We're also going to take a closer look at some intellectuals and academics that Epstein surrounded himself with. People working in fields like AI, genetics, the question of how long a human life can be extended for, questions of really human worth, conversations happening with these people who are out there influencing policy and influencing our lives with their research and their papers and their influence, and how they're talking to Jeffrey Epstein about population control. We have to ask important questions, such as what exactly was Epstein's role in those circles? Was he simply a wealthy donor trying to buy proximity to brilliance, or was there something more strategic about the way he inserted himself into these conversations? Why were these people talking to him? Were they only talking to him because he was giving them money? Or were they talking to him because he had something on them? Or did they actually respect him? Were they taking his advice, which then they used to go out into the world and make changes and make decisions that affect all of us? We're going to find out that I think they were doing that. They were taking his advice. Now, from there, we widen the lens even further into political influence, global banking, and the long-standing institutions that shape economic power, networks that have existed for generations, like the Rothschild family, whom Epstein had very close connections to and relationships with. Now, the strange thing is, like I said, when you start to go deeper and map out all the dots, you see everything is connected. They all lead back to each other. And in this context, they all lead back to Jeffrey Epstein. This would normally be the place where I would thank the sponsor of today's video and dive into that. Well, today we're doing something a little bit different. A lot of you may know that I have a podcast called Crime Weekly, co-hosted by retired police detective and former Big Brother winner Derek Levasseur. So Derek and I, like every year, will be at CrimeCon this May in Las Vegas. And CrimeCon's great. We'll talk about that in a second. But this year, we have a very good chance of being able to sit down and talk to 3 survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. Courtney Wild, who we mentioned in the first installment of the Jeffrey Epstein files, Haley Robson, and Jenna Lisa Jones. Now, CrimeCon's amazing because it gives everyone the chance to meet some of their favorite figures in the true crime community and also hear directly from victims, survivors, from family members of victims, missing people, things like that, from all the people who work on these cases and can give information and insight on them. So for instance, last year, Derek and I sat down and talked to the parents of Megan Trussell. Megan Trussell was a college student in Colorado who was found dead under some suspicious and mysterious circumstances, and her parents have been trying to raise awareness for her case, and we brought them up on stage with us. Well, they stayed in the audience, but they answered questions, and we talked about Megan's case and brought awareness to it. This year, we are going to have Nicole Wasserlichen with us at CrimeCon. We talked about her mother's case on my channel here, and that was a very interesting, mysterious circumstance case. So CrimeCon's always a very enlightening time for us every year. And as I said, we are currently working on getting these interviews set up. It's looking pretty good. And when we do them, we will be posting them on Crime Weekly, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube. Those links are always going to be below in the description box. And if you like what I do here, which you're watching, so I think you might, you will also love Crime Weekly, where Derek and I break down a new case with multiple well-researched episodes on each case. We are known for our deep dives over there, and then we get that added detective perspective from Derek's law enforcement experience. Derek and I also own and operate Criminal Coffee Company. That's the coffee you see in every Coffee and Crime Time intro, the ones where you were like, don't waste all those beans, don't worry, there was a bowl underneath, we caught them. But we have multiple roasts at Criminal Coffee, different flavors. Hazelnut is my personal favorite. It is amazing. It tastes so good. We've got whole bean. This is whole bean. We've got ground. We've got K-Cups. And we work with amazing roasters and partners who create a truly smooth and enjoyable product. It's very, very good coffee. But if that's not enough for you, Criminal Coffee also gives back. Every purchase of coffee helps fund DNA testing for cold cases, supporting victims of crime, and helping organizations dedicated to combating crime. So far, we have actually helped solve 2 cold cases by funding DNA testing that has given back the names of 2 victims who were previously unidentified. Criminal Coffee has donated to the Higher Hope Foundation, the Gabby Petito Foundation, the Elizabeth Smart Foundation, Season of Justice, Moxie Forensics. So right now, if you have any interest in attending CrimeCon this year, you can use code CrimeWeekly to get 10% off your standard badge. And if you want to try Criminal Coffee and help fight crime with us, you can use our special code right now, FILES, F-I-L-E-S, to get 10% off your purchase there as well. All websites and codes can be found in the description box. So check out Crime Weekly, check out Criminal Coffee. I hope to see you all at CrimeCon. And let's dive into today's video. Okay, we left off talking about these different adult clubs of elites and influential people that claim they just meet up and talk about world issues, but they don't have any actual say over policy or things that affect the world and the people in the world, people like you and me. We talked about the Trilateral Commission, which Jeffrey Epstein was a part of, and then we talked about the World Economic Forum. Now, officially, Epstein did not attend the annual Davos meetings as a registered delegate, but he did use the event to connect with billionaires, government officials, and other influential figures. He actually referred to himself as a Davos concierge. He was especially close to the World Economic Forum CEO and president, Boris Brend. And I mentioned Boris Brend before, and I am going to talk more about him and his role and his relationship with Epstein. But for the context of this video, right now, what you need to know is that as of February 26, 2026, Boris Brend stepped down as president and CEO of the World Economic Forum after 8.5 years of serving in those roles. And he did this because of investigations into his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. They had a really tight relationship. They were emailing all the time. They were talking about things that he shouldn't have been talking to Jeffrey Epstein about. And Jeffrey Epstein was introducing him to people and making connections for him that shouldn't have been happening. So before I go any further, I want to introduce you to a concept that was totally new to me. And maybe this is because I don't find interest in groups of self-important people getting together to remind themselves of how smart and powerful they are. Maybe I've been living in the dark and this is pretty well known and accepted. Let me know in the comments if you were aware of this, and also understand that I'm introducing it to you now because it's going to tie back to something we'll discuss today very soon. So it's a put a pin in it moment, but let's talk about intelligence agencies for a moment and understand when I say something about the CIA during this conversation, I'm saying it in broad terms because whatever I'm saying about the CIA can be applied to most of the major intelligence agencies around the world. MI6 in the UK, the SVR in Russia, the Mossad in Israel, they all share a core mission and toolkit. They all aim to gather intelligence, which is information that other governments don't want to be public, that other governments don't want other governments to know. They all aim to influence events, at home and abroad. They all aim to protect their own national security, and they all conduct covert operations, spying. So across countries, intelligence agencies typically use agents as spies, and they use informants. They intercept communications, they use cyber operations for hacking and surveillance, they use covert influence in the form of propaganda and political influence, and they create fronts or intermediaries like businesses or charity organizations. So basically, they'll create a business or an NGO that looks legitimate, but it was made specifically with the intention to gather information, to make contacts with influential people, move money, and provide a believable identity. If you didn't know, an NGO is a non-governmental organization. That's literally what it is. And it's supposed to be kind of a citizens group that's independent of government influence or control, which is hilarious when you actually find out how many NGOs are actually heavily influenced and controlled by the government or people who are beholden to the government or working for the government. So when the intelligence agencies make these sorts of entities, it's so that they can have kind of like a shield. Instead of introducing yourself as working for the CIA, instead of saying, hey, I'm a spy, you can say, hey, I'm Joffrey Smeshstein, and I work for an international consulting firm, right? And this role would give Joffrey Smeshstein a reason to travel, meet people, and, ask questions without raising suspicions, basically acting as an intermediary for whatever intelligence agency they're connected to and using this fake company or this government-controlled company as like a front. I work for this telecommunications company. I'm not a spy. I'm just a normal businessman. So these intelligence agencies also collect something they call assets. And unlike agents who directly work for the intelligence services, an asset is someone that the intelligence services use. And they're usually outside the agency structure, often living completely normal lives. The CIA and other intelligence agencies groom assets, referred to in the industry as developmental relationships. And they do this through a methodical, psychological process designed to transform the target into a trusted source of intelligence. So I started looking into this because I noticed Jeffrey Epstein and his friends and all the people who are pulling the strings in this world, they go to all these conferences all the time. They're always traveling like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 times a year to different conferences around the world. And I'm like, what's up with these conferences, man? So I started looking into it. And I read this 2017 article in The Guardian where a former CIA operative stated, quote, every intelligence service in the world works conferences, sponsors conferences, and looks for ways to get people to conferences, end quote. Interesting. This article continued on to say that more than any other academic arena, conferences lend themselves to espionage, and they sprout up wherever the climate is favorable and can draw a jet-setting crowd, like Davos. So there is public documentation that intelligence services have used academic, cultural, and conference environments to spot, assess, cultivate, and sometimes recruit people of interest, get assets. There's also public CIA material showing a long, deliberate relationship with academia and recruitment in academic settings, colleges, things like that. They actually will get like college students, professors, and make them assets for an intelligence agency, whether it's your home country intelligence agency or a foreign one. Declassified CIA material discussed expanding recruitment on college campuses, covert recruitment of foreign students, and programs designed to place experienced agents in universities where they could identify promising candidates and build relationships. So intelligence agencies exploit existing conferences and elite gatherings to do the same thing. Scientific conferences, Davos, academic symposiums, policy summits, etc., all of this. From an intelligence perspective, these places are gold mines because they are dense with high-value individuals and they are socially open, right? Meaning it's normal for people to be talking to each other and meeting each other. Networking is not only expected at these kinds of events, but encouraged. So intelligence agencies also covertly sponsor conferences. And they do this through something called cutouts or intermediaries. And that's an entity that creates a distance between the intelligence agency and the espionage activity. Now, according to those who have worked for intelligence agencies, the CIA and other agencies have spent millions of dollars staging conferences around the world, and this allows a few things to happen. It allows potential assets who don't know they are targets to come into proximity with intelligence agencies who can try and form relationships with them, and it also allows people who are already consulting with the intelligence agencies to do so without other people finding out. So, for instance, if the CIA openly sponsored a conference, obviously people that they didn't want to know were coming to a CIA conference would not come. And then people who were already kind of working in tandem with the CIA would be like, well, I would go, but I don't want people to know that I'm going because then I'm affiliated with that. And then also people won't trust me. So for professors and academics, people might find out that they were at a CIA conference through something called their CV, which is a curriculum vitae. This is a comprehensive, evolving document outlining a person's entire academic and professional history. It's like a resume. So for an academic, the CV is going to show their education, publications, research experience, teaching experience, and their conference presentations. So Professor John Booth was an emeritus professor at the University of North Texas, specializing in studying Latin America. And he told The Guardian that if you were someone who worked in Latin America, a region whose history had taught them to be very wary of the CIA, and then you wanted to be able to return to that region to continue your academic work or your spy work, your CV could not reflect that you had any contact or association with the CIA because then those people wouldn't trust you. He said of the 10 intelligence conferences that he attended over the years, the CIA ran only 1 or 2 directly. The others were outsourced to Centra Technology Incorporated, which he and The Guardian describe as, quote, the leader of a growing industry of intermediaries in the Washington area, cutouts in espionage parlance that runs conferences for the CIA, end quote. So basically, the CIA supplies Centra with funding and a list of people to invite, and then Centra organizes the event and hosts it in a neutral setting, which creates a legitimate academic and professional setting that doesn't seem to be connected to the CIA. No obvious intelligence presence, no formal pressure. Everything feels organic. A controlled ecosystem where access happens naturally. The Guardian article states, quote, the importance of a conference may be measured not just by the number of Nobel Prize winners or Oxford dons it attracts, but by the number of spies, U.S. and foreign intelligence officers flock to the conference for the same reason that Army recruiters concentrate on low-income neighborhoods. They make the best hunting grounds. While a university campus might have only 1 or 2 professors of interest to an intelligence service, the right conference, on drone technology perhaps, or ISIS, could have dozens. End quote. So this all ties into the things we've already touched on. Education systems, science research, high-profile figures with money and influence, and now we add another layer, espionage. Put a pin in it. We're going to come back to it soon. But first, let's return to the holy grail of all conferences, Davos, run by the World Economic Forum. And similarly to how we have been using Carina as a framework to understand Epstein and the dangers he posed, we will use the World Economic Forum and those who were involved in it, the richest and most powerful people in the world, to do the same. Let's start with the man who made the World Economic Forum possible, Klaus Schwab. Born in Ravensburg, Germany, to Swiss parents who moved to Germany so that his father, Eugene Wilhelm Schwab, could become the director of an industrial company called Escher Weiss AG. Now, this company, they manufactured weapons for the Nazi regime. They will tell you online that this is a conspiracy theory if you're just doing a quick Google search, but it's really not, because I dug deeper. And it is a fact that the company acted as a contractor for the Nazi regime. It's also a fact that the Ravensburg, Germany branch used forced labor. Here's a screenshot from the result of an investigation regarding the problem of forced labor in enterprises with Swiss capital in Germany during World War II. This investigation was done by the SDA, that's the National Swiss Press Agency. Now, when I say forced labor, in this context, it means millions of people who were forced to work for the Nazi state or German companies against their will, usually under the threat of violence, imprisonment, or death. And the Nazi regime used forced labor from several groups: POWs, civilians from German-occupied countries, and yes, concentration camp prisoners. So in those cases, this was essentially extermination through labor, meaning the work conditions were so brutal that death was expected. So little Klaus Schwab attended school in Ravensburg during a time when education across Germany was organized to promote racial ideology and eugenics. Schools were required to teach the idea that some people were hereditarily more valuable while others were inferior. Children in Ravensburg would also be part of the Hitler Youth. Now, I'm not saying that Klaus Schwab bought into these ideologies or that he was a part of the Hitler Youth. I'm just saying he grew up in an area as a child and was educated in an area as a child where those things would have been not only taught, but made to seem as if there was no other options. This wasn't like a time of great critical thinking. So Klaus graduated from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in 1961, where he studied mechanical engineering. He also earned a doctorate in economics and a master's in public administration from Harvard. At Harvard, Klaus and Henry Kissinger became close, and Kissinger actually acted as Klaus's mentor, and they will be close forever until Henry Kissinger's death. Henry Kissinger would go on to become a national security advisor under Nixon and a Secretary of State under Nixon and Ford. So Kissinger came up many times with Jeffrey Epstein and the people he spoke with regularly. Now, if you don't know who Henry Kissinger is or was, because at this time he has passed away, he represented what actual power looks like in United States politics and foreign policy. And in my opinion, and the opinion of others, he represents the darker side of American power, the person working behind the scenes and keeping secrets. And remember, he was Klaus Schwab's mentor and friend. So Kissinger authorized and approved thousands of secret bombing raids in Cambodia during the Vietnam War. He kept this a secret from the public and from Congress, and he did this to disrupt supply routes. So working with the CIA, Kissinger helped undermine democracy in Chile, which led to the overthrow of their president and subsequently the death, torture, and disappearance of tens of thousands of people. And during the Nixon administration, Kissinger authorized illegal FBI wiretaps on his own aides and journalists in a little thing we like to call Watergate. I could go on and on. The list of examples like this, what Henry Kissinger did, does not stop there. He was very, very working actively with the CIA and really calling the shots, pulling the strings, not just in the United States, but around the world. Klaus Schwab was heavily influenced by Henry Kissinger. They remained close all throughout Kissinger's life, and Kissinger was a frequent speaker and participant at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which Klaus would create in 1971. Klaus Schwab also helped popularize a concept called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is basically the claim that a new wave of technology is changing how humans live, work, and interact, just like earlier technological revolutions have. Now, Klaus Schwab says that we're entering an era where technology has started to merge with biology and intelligence. AI, gene editing, robots, things like that. Those are all at the forefront, and we, the people, need to prepare for changes like jobs being automated, AI making decisions, and big shifts in the economy. Klaus Schwab believes that this could all bring major benefits like medical breakthroughs and longer life expectancies, machines and robots doing dangerous or boring jobs instead of humans, and new innovations that could solve issues like climate change. He also recognizes that this could cause massive job disruption. It could widen economic equality, which is already pretty wide. And there could be a lot of, ethical issues around genetic engineering and AI and concerns with privacy and surveillance. But he figures, hey, it's coming, whether we like it or not, whatever. So we at the World Economic Forum, aka rich and powerful people, we should find a way to shape this change and manage this transition, because we're not going to stop it, because we're going to benefit from it. Well, you guys are all going to be out of jobs while AI and computers do your jobs. We're going to benefit from it. And we just need to figure out a way to make this work for everyone, aka us. Now, this is all important because as we come to find from the Epstein files, Jeffrey Epstein was very weirdly fixated and interested in things like DNA, gene editing, AI, medical innovations, and climate change. Now, I want to give you an example of how the rich and self-important people talk about us normies behind the scenes in emails that they didn't think we would ever see, but we did, and we're going to call some more people out. In July of 2016, Jeffrey Epstein was having a very intense discussion with German philosopher, AI researcher, and cognitive scientist Joshua Bach. Now, Bach has worked at several prestigious institutions, including Martin Nowak's program for evolutionary dynamics at Harvard. Now, there's Harvard and Martin Nowak again, and they'll come up a bunch as we travel through the land of Epstein. Bach has also held research positions at the MIT Media Lab, MIT, another topic we will run into again and again. And he served as the vice president of research at AI Foundation, where he focused on developing AI systems capable of more sophisticated, human-like interactions, because that's what we need more of. But let's talk about Bach's philosophical views. He believes the brain builds a simulation of reality, that consciousness comes from information processing, and that the concept of the self does not exist. It's a model created by the brain, meaning humans are just biological information systems. He also believes that AI will eventually become conscious if it processes information in the right way, because AI is an information processing system, and he has described humans as information processing systems embedded in biological bodies. So, in November of 2025, Joshua Bach wrote a Substack post because he's trying to explain his relationship with Epstein. And he's really upset and hurt because he's being attacked about it, because this was even before the files came out, but some stuff had already come out and had connected Bach to Epstein, and people were, talking to him about it and kind of being like, what the hell, dude? What are you doing? And he was like, listen, let me explain. So Joshua Bach says that between the years of 2013 and 2017, a part of his work at MIT and Harvard was funded by Jeffrey Epstein. Bach met Epstein through several well-known scientists from the fields of AI and psychology, and although he knew that Epstein had been convicted for the trafficking of minors, the solicitation of prostitution from a minor, people Bach trusted had assured him that Epstein had reformed himself, and I guess that's all he needed. So Bach goes on to write, quote, Epstein had an unusual psychology. He was high-strung, intensely curious, and utterly devoid of fear, guilt, or shame. In the absence of these basic human traits, he was a high-functioning sociopath, bound only by the rules and loyalties he discovered for himself. He was incredibly well-connected with friends in all political camps, including existing and former heads of state in the U.S. and all over the world. His circle of acquaintances and friends also included a number of the most famous mathematicians, physicists, cognitive scientists, AI researchers, economists, and biologists of our time, end quote. Yeah, dude, we know. Now let's look at a July 2016 conversation between Bach and Epstein, where Epstein's sociopathic traits, as Joshua Bach said, are made very apparent. So once again, this is the way the rich, powerful, and elite of society and the world think and talk about the general public, us. So the people out there who are running research and influencing changes that will ultimately affect us all, This is how they talk about us. This is how they think about us. So first of all, Epstein suggests that society should treat people like expendable cells. He says the brain removes unused neurons, so maybe society should remove unused people. Epstein also says, quote, maybe climate change is a good way of dealing with overpopulation. The Earth's forest fire, potentially a good thing for the species. Too many people, so many mass executions of the elderly and infirm make sense, end quote. There's that sociopath we all know and love. So Bach responds that having children expensive in terms of upbringing and missed opportunity is actually a more humane way of dealing with population control. He states, quote, environmental stress while leaving near rock bottom tends to lead people to have more children because there's no missed opportunity, and high mortality requires more attempts at procreation. Humans are a hardy species. Outside of focused famine events and wars, only small fractions of any given population die. I suspect that strong reductions in population will come from large-scale failing of agriculture. The climate change itself will result in migration and wars, but most people will survive that. But who knows? I might be wrong, end quote. So if I'm understanding correctly, and I think I am, Joshua Bach is saying, hey, if we make things like housing, education, and childcare expensive, then people will have less children. He mentions missed opportunities, and he's referring to people, who become parents often having to give up career opportunities and income to raise children. So let's make education in general expensive so that if people invest in that, they won't want to start families and forego or delay entering the workforce. So we should make, education for adults expensive, like college education. If people spend hundreds and thousands of dollars in getting a college education, and then they graduate from college in debt and they still have to pay all that off, they're not going to want to start having kids, right? They're going to want to go right into the workforce so they can start paying off this loan and then making all that money that this college degree promised them, which we kind of all know isn't really the case, is it? You don't necessarily just, get out of college with a degree and start making a ton of money. Most people, in fact, struggle to pay their student loans every month. Most people can't. Now, this is all connected back to a greater messaging that has emerged in the United States. And I can't speak for other countries, but in the United States, I can speak for this messaging that came out over the past decades of this is what you do. You go to high school and then you go to college. And if you don't go to college, you're dumb. If you don't have a college degree, you're not smart and you don't know what you're talking about. It's kind of putting this whole college experience as a way not only towards a financially stable life, but, intelligence, prestige, legitimacy. Like, we won't respect you or take you seriously if you don't have a college education. Is that true, or is that just part of the plan these people had to control our population, to keep the population low? So Joshua Bach is saying if we make everything about making money, because everything is so expensive that you need a lot of money, people will have less children or decide to not have children at all, and then we can control the population growth that way. Bach is also saying that climate change alone isn't adequate enough to make a big enough impact on reducing the human population, because humans are a hardy species after all. Well, thanks for that. I guess we're a hardy bunch. He said we need more extreme events. Large wars, catastrophic disasters, famine. More population declines would only happen if there are agricultural failures and major disruptions in food supply. Put a pin in that, because we're going to talk more about population control in the context of food supply and agriculture and the companies who run the United States and much of the world's food production and distribution. This is all very important. And I'll just throw out one little name to you, Monsanto. So we're going to talk about all of that. Now, Michael Mann, who's an author and climatologist, he says that this kind of population control discussion is, quote, entirely keeping with the ethos of this group, end quote. And he's referring to Epstein and his elite associates. Studies suggest that the more wealthy someone becomes, the less empathetic they are. And those with money and power often care less about those with little or no power and money. And researchers don't believe that less empathetic people become wealthy. They actually believe that with money and then power comes a reduction in empathy. So it's not even really the money thing, right? It's the access to power and influence that a great deal of money gives you. With that in mind, remember that all of the people who go to Davos every year and discuss the issues that are pressing to humanity, they are some of the richest and most powerful in the world. By default, according to these studies, they would also be some of the least empathetic in the world. And they would also be the most likely to care the least about people who have less money and less power than them, which is like everyone. And we're supposed to look to them to find solutions that benefit the 99.9%. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Should we let them tell us that it makes sense? Just, think about that for a minute. Because once again, they'll keep telling you, we're just people talking. We're just people talking. We don't impact actual policy change. That's not true. And that's not true because of something called stakeholder capitalism, which we will also talk about. If you don't know what stakeholder capitalism is, neither did I until I started looking into all of this. And now I just feel like I have no hope left in the world. All right, so Jeffrey Epstein also makes some sort of music equating to racial intelligence theory, and he says that Western music, like symphonic music, reflects complex intellectual development, but, quote, African music has lots of beats and little development. No accident, it mirrors their learning process, end quote. Besides the fact that it's just factually wrong, it's also obviously morally wrong. It's just a disgusting thing to say. What does Joshua Bach say in response? He's a smart guy, a scientist, very influential. He's doing all this research at academic institutions. He's influencing through his research and work with these academic institutions, the next generation. What does he say about that? Does he push back? Because, Epstein's a sociopath. Is he like, hey, that's not right, dude? No. He says, quote, exactly. I looked up the statistics. Black kids in the U.S. have slower cognitive development and never catch up, which the study, of course, attributed to social factors without any evidence, and they had faster motor development. I suspect this means their brains are slower at learning high-level concepts because the low-level structures are optimized for a shorter time, but they will keep the lead in motor development because it is easier to learn, and they have more time and attention to practice once they get the structures in place. It could also be that they have an additional set of learning directives in place that adapts them better to a more hunting/running style of life, whereas the Europeans had to adapt for identifying long-term seasonal patterns, delayed gratification for agriculture, etc. End quote. He's saying exactly, right? Black people are not as smart as white people. And they say that it's because of environmental factors, but they don't have evidence for that. And this could be, genetic. This could be genetic. It kind of sounds like what they were talking about in a certain country during a certain time when Klaus Schwab was coming up in Ravensburg, Germany. But anyways, remember Joshua Bach said in his Substack article that Epstein was devoid of fear, shame, guilt. He was a functioning sociopath. And I do think that this July 2016 conversation illustrated that very clearly. Epstein's talking about mass executions of the infirm and elderly and making these very racially charged statements. And Joshua Bach seemed to have noticed that. Well, maybe this was a person you wouldn't want to continue affiliating with, right? So maybe after 2016, Bach was like, no, I'm done. This is when he realized Epstein's a psychopath. Nope, that's not what happened. Because in May of 2017, Joshua Bach was emailing that he would be in New York in May, and he wanted to know if he could use one of Epstein's apartments. He kept talking to and meeting with Jeffrey Epstein all the way until 2019. Okay, the year Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and went back to prison. In January of that year, Bach emailed Leslie Groff and told her that he'd been invited to speak at Davos, and Jeffrey had offered to take care of the flight. Because remember, Jeffrey Epstein is a Davos concierge. On January 11th, 2019, Joshua Bach emailed Leslie, and he told her, quote, Gino Yu tells me he would be most happy if Svetlana wants to join our accommodations in Davos, and also offers to take her along to Zurich and Marrakesh after World Economic Forum. I am sure she would have a lot of fun. Jeffrey already met with Gino. I include Gino's email address above. End quote. Gino Yu also tells Joshua Bach, with Leslie CC'd in, quote, I will also have a shaman with me as well as a psychonaut that grows his own mushrooms, end quote. So Leslie forwards this to Epstein. She asks, should I pass this along to Svetlana? And Epstein responds, yes. Now we know, and we will talk about here and along the way as we go through this journey, we'll talk about a lot how Epstein's connections with powerful and politically connected people did not stop in the U.S. and extended to many other countries, including Norway, France, Russia, a lot. So, for instance, Sergei Belikov, who was the Deputy Minister of Economic Development in Russia and also the head of the St. Petersburg Economic Forum Foundation, which sounds familiar. It sounds like the World Economic Forum, but yeah, the St. Petersburg Economic Forum Foundation. So that foundation runs the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the purpose of which I am sure is no surprise to anyone because it mirrors the World Economic Forum. They bring together the chief executives of major Russian and international companies, heads of state, political leaders, so that all of these people can have important conversations about economic policy and how to protect the global image of Russia. So each year, more than 10,000 people from over 120 countries take part in it. Also, no surprise to anyone that Epstein was in attendance at this forum. And also, no surprise, the forum has a history of including female escorts from all over Russia. Sergei Belikov is also a graduate of the FSB Academy. This is basically Russia's secret service. It's like their CIA, their intelligence agency. And they, among other things, train spies, including what are called honeypots, right? Honeypots are female spies who use sex to get intelligence from dumb men who are thinking with the wrong heads. So we have a callback from earlier in this video. Conferences, intelligence services, breeding grounds for grooming assets. Is this just happening in Russia? Nope, of course not. Could it be happening at the World Economic Forum? Certainly, definitely is. Allegedly, don't come for me, but based on my research and the facts available, definitely. So just last month, Noma Zurobina, a Russian citizen, pled guilty to making false statements to the FBI regarding her relationship to the FSB, which is like the training grounds for KGB spies. She also admitted to involvement in an interstate prostitution network in an effort to secure U.S. citizenship. And that kind of sounds like what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, right? He was bringing women from Russia, telling them that he was going to get them visas for being students and stuff like that. He was having high government officials in other countries help him do this, by the way. We'll talk about that. And then he was basically making them, do other things and then also recruit other women and girls to do these other things. It sounds exactly like that. So, quote, in June or July of 2024, Zurobina admitted to the FBI that she had previously lied to federal law enforcement officers about her relationship with the FSB, stating in substance and in part that in or around December 2020, while in Russia, she met with an officer whom she understood was from the FSB, agreed to help the FSB with network marketing, and was given the FSB codename Alyssa. Between in or about December 2020 and in or about June 2022, Zurobina met with the FSB officer several times and communicated with the FSB officer on numerous occasions using encrypted messaging applications. The FSB officer instructed Zurobina to share contact information of journalists in the United States, to attend the 2021 St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and to look into a particular individual in the United States, which Zurobina agreed to do, end quote. So Zurobina's honeypot being sent to the United States, being sent to the forum in Russia to basically target a government official or somebody who was of interest to Russia on the United States side and groom that person into an asset or just get information out of them. Between 2018 and 2024, while living in the United States, Zarubina participated in a scheme to transport women between New York and New Jersey to engage in prostitution at a massage parlor business in East Brunswick. According to U.S. prosecutors, Noma Zarubina attended seminars, forums, and conventions attended by prominent members of academia, foreign policy, U.S. government, and the media, and her job was to identify potentially helpful contacts in the U.S. and pass them along to the FSB so the agency could invite them to Russia to convert them to the Russian way of thinking. Zarubina successfully persuaded several Capitol Hill power brokers to pose for pictures so that they could be blackmailed. She had some weird relationship with an FBI agent where she was like texting him in the middle of the night and he was like, leave me alone, but no, I love you, come back. And she was like, I'm gonna, be everything you need. They were exchanging weird texts. You can look into it. And Zarubina was also connected to Elena Branson, who was the godmother of her daughter. So Elena Branson fled the United States to Russia in 2020 after being charged as an agent of a foreign government. She is a Russian native who gained dual citizenship after marrying William Branson, a pioneer in the field of international economics, a professor at Princeton University, longtime consultant to the World Bank as well as the U.S. Federal Reserve Board and the U.S. Treasury Department. He also served on Nixon's Council of Economic Advisors. Now, did Elena want to cozy up to Branson because he was like so hot and smart and like young and handsome? Or is it because he was very connected to a lot of important, powerful kind of industries and companies and also very well respected in the academic world and at, Ivy League colleges? Probably the latter, right? And that's probably what Svetlana was doing, hanging out with Joshua Bach and Gino Yu. Let's be honest. Let's just be honest here. Sorry, Bach. I'm sorry if you thought she was really into you, but what was Svetlana doing? Flying along on the jet to the World Economic Forum with some shaman. Anyways, we'll talk about that in a minute. So was Elena interested in Branson because it was love, or was she using him, right, for her espionage activities? Well, Branson met Elena, who was 23 years younger than him, in the late 90s after an IMF conference. A conference? She met him at a conference. That stands for International Monetary Fund. So just a boring conference. And remember, these women are trained to go to conferences and forums such as these to meet men who are involved in politics, businesses, academics, etc. Elena also had a daughter who traveled from Russia and was adopted by William Branson. Prosecutors claim that Elena Branson founded a Russian propaganda center in New York and started an I Love Russia campaign aimed at American youth. She also made contact with U.S. politicians trying to arrange meetings with Russian officials, and it is claimed that in 2022, she was communicating with Vladimir Putin himself. So when officials raided Elena Branson's apartment in 2020, they found information about Noma Zarubina, and this is a network that includes multiple women placed in the U.S. for nefarious purposes. But once again, I don't want anyone to think I'm like, the U.S. is so innocent, and there's spies here. They're infiltrating us. No, it's not just Russia sending people and women here, and it's not like the United States doesn't do the same thing in other countries. But as a person who lives in the United States and has an interest in being protected, I kind of have a bigger problem with, spies being here and trying to sleep with high-level government leaders to get them to kind of not have the U.S. best interests at heart. And at this point, what even are the U.S. best interests? But I don't know. Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum doesn't know either, I promise you. So that leads me back to Epstein and his Russian connections. We know that Epstein traveled to Russia more than once. He had all sorts of visas. We also know he had a network of scouts who would search for and recruit young Russian women. Sergei Belikov sent Epstein emails asking for help recruiting high-profile United States figures to his forum. And Epstein wrote back, quote, "I will be all the help I can. Who is your dream attendees? Peter Thiel, Nathan Myhrvold, Reid Hoffman," end quote. Maybe you don't know those names yet, but you will. We're going to talk about them. We're going to call them out. They've already been called out to some extent, but they need to be called out more. So in 2015, Epstein asked Sergei Belikov for help dealing with a Russian woman who he claimed was trying to blackmail a group of powerful businessmen in New York. And this woman was making these allegations that these powerful men were taking advantage of women like her. And Epstein said, quote, "It is a bad business for everyone involved." She arrived in New York Saturday of last week, staying at the Four Seasons. Suggestions? End quote. Sergei responded that he needed a few days to get information about the woman, and he eventually did get Epstein a dossier on her. And they used this information basically to have a secret meeting with her between her and, I guess, one of these men who it is suspected. We know who it probably was, but it's not actually. I don't want to say. There's certain things I can't say because they're not proven, but can I say it's suspected? It's suspected that it was Leon Black. Just suspected, okay? But anyways, there's a meeting between this man, who we don't know who it is because his name's redacted in the files, and then this woman, and they meet and they're like having drinks, and he's basically telling her like, well, what else do you need? Like basically, you know, how much can I pay you to shut up? And they used information from that dossier to figure out like what her pain points were. I think she had a kid who was like going to college at the time. She had like financial problems. Anyways, there is more in the files about this specific case. But we have to move back to Jascha Bach and Gino Yu and Svetlana, who, in my opinion, was almost certainly one of the Russian women that Epstein utilized to entertain his associates. And was he doing that in like, hey, get intelligence and information from these people? Or was he doing it just to like have another thing to blackmail them with or to have another thing to like offer them that they wanted? I don't know. Could be all of the above. So in 2010, Epstein offered a 26-year-old Russian woman to Prince Andrew. Bill Gates has admitted to having affairs with 2 Russian women during his marriage to Melinda, one of whom he met through Epstein. So we have Bach and Gino Yu, 2 scientists and philosophers, traveling to Davos on Epstein's dime in the presence of some magic mushrooms and Svetlana. Gino Yu is an associate professor and director of digital entertainment and game development at the School of Design at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He had frequent contact with Epstein from 2015 all the way up to Epstein's arrest. And it appears it all started when Yu was working on something called OpenCog, a research project aimed at building artificial general intelligence, or AGI. A type of AI that can think, reason, and learn broadly, like a human, rather than just performing one narrow task. That's where we talk about Gino Yu's partner, Benjamin Gortzel, who approached Epstein for funding for this project and for AGI, and Epstein provided this funding. So in 2013, Benjamin Gortzel had introduced Gino Yu to Epstein, and from then on, Yu and Epstein met in person often and communicated regularly. In October of 2017, Gino Yu emailed Epstein talking about a post-Tulum gathering saying, quote, "Is your island out of commission? I have a mansion in the Hamptons I have access to. I could put something together at your place in Arizona. We are talking around November 10, 13, or 14. Will you be around then? I could build a program around your interests," end quote. It seems that Gino Yu and Jeffrey Epstein both had an interest in something called virtual immortality or digital immortality. And this is the idea that a person could continue to exist in some form inside computers or digital systems after their biological body dies. And this ties into the concept of transhumanism, something Epstein and many of his cohorts and contacts were also interested in. Transhumanism is the idea that human beings could evolve beyond their natural biological limits by using technology. And the idea is that human evolution might become guided by technology rather than natural selection. And some transhumanists believe that people could eventually become post-human. They would live far longer than humans today. They would have enhanced intelligence. They might even merge their bodies or their consciousnesses with machines or AI, and they might exist partially in digital environments, like virtual reality. Has anyone ever seen Ready Player One? Does that seem like a life you want to live? I don't. Now, obviously, there are downfalls to this whole thing, and one of the biggest criticisms is the inequality angle. Opportunities such as these would probably only be available to the wealthy and powerful. Remember, Epstein's business partner, Benjamin Gortzel, was the co-founder of OpenCog, but he is also the CEO of SingularityNet, an AI and blockchain company, and chair of the AGI Society, a nonprofit that holds an annual AI conference. Gortzel is considered the godfather of AGI, which, remember, is artificial general intelligence, an AI that can think and learn like a human. Theoretically, AGI could learn medicine, engineering, music. It could invent new technologies. It could plan complex projects, understand human emotions and social situations. It could teach itself new knowledge, etc., etc. Now, in 2023, Benjamin Gortzel said that artificial intelligence could replace up to 80% of human jobs in the coming years, even before AG leaves the realm of being theoretical and enters the real world. And in 2025, Benjamin Gortzel said that AGI was only a few years away, and he feels like it will be a net positive for humanity. He said, quote, "I think we'll achieve AGI, AI as smart as humans, within 2 to 7 years. Shortly after, we'll see artificial superintelligence far surpassing human intelligence. Once AGI can perform any human job, most jobs will vanish rapidly. UBI becomes almost inevitable in developed nations," end quote. UBI is Universal Basic Income, and this is a policy idea where the government gives every adult citizen a regular amount of money, no matter their job status or income. So Benjamin Gortzel is saying that he and others want to create this AGI and robots to do all the jobs so that humans don't have any jobs to do. The technology far surpasses human intelligence, and then we all have to depend on the government to give us money to survive because we are no longer actually needed in the world at all. What? So you have those with a utopian mindset who look at this through the rosiest of colored glasses. You'd have to think this was a positive in any way. But those people, the utopian positive people, they're like, hey, this is going to give humans the ability to do what they've always been meant to do. We can frolic through flower fields. We can focus on what we want to do instead of what we have to do. Like, we don't have to get up and go to a 9 to 5. We don't have to work 40, 50, 60 hours. We spend time with our families. We can do the things that make us happy. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, what if what you want to do is write novels or poetry? Well, who cares at that point? Who cares about what you wrote? If AGI can write it 100 times better than a human because its intelligence has far surpassed human intelligence, right? Because AGI is not just smart, it's also learning emotions now. It's AI that thinks and behaves like a human. So it basically is a human. It can do everything a human can do, but better, and you don't have to feed it. Right? You don't have to worry about pretending to care about it. I mean, until it takes over, like the Matrix. But you don't have the same challenges with humanity, and it's better than humans. So now AGI has taken over all the jobs, and we're getting a basic income from the government. And humans are like, we can do whatever we want now. All right, awesome. What do you want to do? You want to invent something or create a business? Good luck. AGI and its robots have already invented something way better, and they've created businesses that are way better, and they don't even need you to work there because they've got it covered. Humans are obsolete. They have no value, and so therefore they are at the mercy of whatever the government decides they are worth. And AGI has made them worth basically nothing, all right? Now, once again, I understand there's people out there who are like, no, that wouldn't happen. It would happen. It absolutely would happen. It would. And if your interest and your passion is creative or art-centered, you love to draw, you love to paint, you're going to be painting these beautiful, masterpieces that would in any other society or time of history be considered a beautiful masterpiece. But you're going to bring it to, your overlords and be like, look at my masterpiece. And to them, they're going to look at it and they're going to be like, oh, that's cute. That's cute, little child. Go take your finger painting and hang it up on the fridge, because AGI just created something that the human mind could never even comprehend, and it's gorgeous and it's beautiful and it's way better than, I don't even know what I'm looking at here. What is this little finger painting? Your little stick people. So when that point comes, and according to Benjamin Gortzel, and the World Economic Forum and the people who are making decisions for us. At that point, when that comes, and it will come, it's a matter of, when, not if, who even is the government made up of at that point? The rich, the powerful, the elite, the very people who decided creating this AGI and coming up with a system where the world doesn't need humans was a good idea? Or since AGI is so much more intelligent, will the government be made up of robots? Probably not. It'll probably be a very, very, very small group, a small, really powerful and rich group controlling these advanced AI systems that's going to become more extremely powerful because they have access to the systems that are now running the world. And those who control the most advanced technology would control everything: economic production, information systems, infrastructure, food production, military capabilities, so on and so forth. You think that power is concentrated and unequal now? Give it 10 or 20 years and power and control will become even more concentrated in the hands of the very few people and institutions who are going to usher this matrix life into reality. And if you think humans are passive, less intelligent, and at a loss for meaning or purpose now, what do you think they'll become in a world like this, where machines and computers handle the bulk of the work and the decisions? They will become less skilled, less intelligent, less independent, and more dependent on technology and government. And we are already so dependent on technology at this point. We're going to talk about that in a second and to show how bad it is and where we've gotten. But on the concept of population control, these machines and the people managing them, controlling them, may one day ask, how many people does a fully automated society even actually need? How many resources or how much money should we really be giving to these people when they don't actually do anything, when they've become, complete consumers and dependents and they don't contribute anything? They're not working, they're not inventing things. Why are humans even important? These people like Benjamin Gortzel will say, no, this is going to be great for everyone. Shorter work weeks, greater abundance, new types of creative and social roles for humans. How much do any of these people value creativity now? How much has been lost when we look at the books being written, the movies being made, what's on our television screens, what's on our phones? Who cares about art and really anything anymore? It's all about quantity over quality. Give me a quick hit of dopamine. Let me scroll through my phone. What stupid video can I watch next? Nobody's creating anything that used to be considered great works of art and literature anymore, because that's not what we as the general population want. We want to be able to put something on our TV that's kind of interesting but really dumb, so that we can scroll on our phones at the same time and we don't really have to pay too much attention to either one of these things. How much do we as a society and the people that control society care about art and creativity now? And was that by design? If you asked me, I would say yes. Are we all to become kindergarteners, being pacified by our overlords, patting us on the heads and sending us away with our meager monthly income because we don't actually matter to society or the world as a whole anymore? Now, Benjamin Gortzel was working closely with Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein was funding his work, not just on OpenCog, but so much more. So if Benjamin Gortzel was willing to take help and money from someone like Jeffrey Epstein, what does that say about the group of people who would be in charge of everyone and everything when this emerging technology becomes our new normal? We see in the DOJ files that Benjamin Gortzel met Epstein in 2008. And in 2011, he asked Epstein in an email if he would fund half of a $3 million grant over 4 years to fund a full speed ahead toward the AGI plan. Gortzel has since claimed that while he was begging Epstein for money, he has, quote, basically zero knowledge of Epstein's sexual peculiarities and exploitative practices, and have no orientation towards that sort of thing and little understanding of it. It was all about being overly desperate at that stage for any source of money to fund innovative frontier science, which Epstein did recognize as valuable, but mainstream science at that time did not. End quote. In 2013, Epstein told Ben that he had spoken to more than 5 large philanthropists on really getting behind AI and AGI, and these philanthropists had went online to check out Benjamin Gortzel, and Epstein said, what I predicted was true. There's not any real interest because of what you look like. They can't take you seriously. Your hair's long. You look like a hippie. Benjamin Gortzel replied, and he was like, hey, if you can get me this freaking money, dude, I'll cut my hair. I'll wear a suit and tie. I'll do whatever if you arrange meetings with these people who give me money. But there's already so many videos of me online with long hair. I don't really think it would make that much of an impact. He also said, quote, I know you have a lot of stuff to do in your life, so I do appreciate you taking time to talk with me about this somewhat silly, but I admit possibly relevant topic. Obviously, I have my own share of human peculiarities existing in my brain alongside a lot of, in my opinion, really deep and potentially impactful AGI thinking. I'm thinking about the robot child IQ test stuff this morning, by the way, mainly about what order it makes most sense to pursue the child IQ test milestones in giving their own relationship and also given the current state of open cog development, end quote. So I don't want to say the word peculiarities again, but remember when Benjamin Gortzel was asked, why did you work with Epstein? He was like, I just wanted money, and I didn't realize about what peculiarities he had that I didn't share. But now he's emailing Epstein years before this, and he's like, I have my own share of peculiarities. And, maybe it's just a word he likes, or maybe it was a Freudian slip. So Benjamin Gortzel is talking about child IQ test systems or whatever, and this was in response to a request from Epstein that Benjamin Gortzel should have an AI system pass IQ tests for children, and this would provide concrete research milestones. So Epstein's giving these people advice and saying, you should do this, you should do this. And not only did Benjamin Gortzel say he was thinking about it, but later he emailed Epstein that he would send him a robot child IQ test proposal that day or the next. But also, according to Benjamin Gortzel, since his ties to Epstein have been found out, he said, quote, Epstein was very smart and fairly technically savvy and had a lot of ideas about AI, which were not terribly stupid nor terribly brilliant. I did not pay much attention to them, nor did they influence my work in any way, end quote. I mean, if you're thinking about his suggestions and taking time to come up with proposals, it seems like your work was influenced, though. And you could say, no, I was just saying that stuff to him to pacify him so I could get the money. Okay, but how do we know? How do we know? You want our trust in ushering this new AGI system where 80% of our jobs are gone and humans become absolutely, completely dependent on technology and the government. But how do we know that we can trust you when we don't even know if you're actually being honest, when you're, telling us you're lying to Epstein to just get the money, if that's what your excuse is? If you're saying that, how do we know you're not just lying to us to get our money, to get our compliance? And if the greatest minds of our time, who are apparently going to dictate the way our future and the future of our children end up looking, are being influenced by whoever is putting money in their pocket, even if they are convicted sex offenders and people of questionable character, isn't that still something we should be concerned about? Shouldn't we still be concerned and asking questions and really not fully trust people like that? Now, Jeffrey Epstein used different corporations and foundations to give people money, to give Benjamin Gortzel money, including something called the Southern Trust Company, which was registered in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Money from this entity was given to Humanity Plus in 2014. This is a nonprofit focused on transhumanism, a nonprofit that Benjamin Gortzel was the vice president of. In an email using Joshua Bach as an intermediary, Epstein and Gortzel discussed using Humanity Plus to, quote unquote, funnel money. That's what they said. I'm not just saying that. That's why I said, quote unquote, funnel money. Benjamin Gortzel said, quote, Humanity Plus can be used to funnel money to you so long as it's for pure research, not for a commercial venture. The research has to be on something in line with H Plus's transhumanist mission, which is the case for any AGI work. However, Humanity Plus will eat 5% of the money for its role as a pass-through, end quote. So basically, if someone like Epstein wanted to fund AGI research, but not necessarily have their name as the one putting the money in, whether that's because they didn't want to be connected to it publicly or because publicly them being connected to it would look bad, such as Jeffrey Epstein, they could donate the money to Humanity Plus, give the money to Humanity Plus, and then Humanity Plus would pass that money along to the researcher as a grant so that the researcher doesn't know the money's coming from Jeffrey Epstein. But, as Benjamin Gortzel said, This is, he's all about AI and AGI and a brighter future, utopian future for humans. But don't worry, Humanity Plus is going to keep 5% as an administrative fee and whatever. Basically he's benefiting. Humanity Plus is, we'll give some of the money to them, most of the money. We're going to keep 5% for ourselves to be your pass-through, to funnel it. I'm not saying this is legal, wrong, bad. I'm not saying Benjamin Gortzel did anything wrong using Humanity Plus as a funnel. Keeping 5% as an administrative fee could be many reasons legally and properly why that happened. But in 2019, the New York Times printed that Jeffrey Epstein's Southern Trust Company gave $100,000 to pay the salary of Benjamin Gortzel at Humanity Plus. This was according to Ben's own resume, which the Times linked to, and I clicked on it. But of course, that link has since been taken down. So we go to the Wayback Machine, which I'm sure one of the first things that Benjamin Gortzel and his cohorts are going to do when AI is running the world is just completely demolish the Wayback Machine. It's going to be like that scene from Office Space where he just takes like the fax machine or the printer out in the back and starts kicking it. They're going to have the AGI robots just like beat the absolute shit out of the Wayback Machine, because using the Wayback Machine, we can retrieve it. Here it is. Here is where it says exactly the same thing that Jeffrey Epstein paid for his salary that year. So interesting. Now, when asked for a comment in 2019, Benjamin Gortzel said, quote, "I have no desire to talk about Epstein right now. The stuff I'm reading about him in the papers is pretty disturbing and goes way beyond what I thought his misdoings and kinks were. Yetch." End quote. I don't know what yetch, Y-E-C-C-H. How would you say? Yeech? Yetch? Yek? Yuck? Maybe it's yuck. Oh, Benjamin Gortzel's just disgusted by this. So you did know, though, when you worked with him, that he had misdoings and kinks. That's kind of what I'm hearing from your comment. You just didn't know how deep it went. So that New York Times article also mentions several other people Epstein was associated with, including Steven Pinker, who one of Epstein's websites claimed had been sponsored through Epstein. We have a lot more to talk about in this topic, and we will, but I want to steer back to the more important and base level issue at hand, the issue that touches every aspect of Jeffrey Epstein's life and the one that touches every aspect of our lives. Once again, the people who hold the money hold the power, and they don't care about politics or the issues. They care about what makes them rich and keeps them rich. So we're over here on TikTok, on Facebook, in the streets nowadays, and we're fighting over racial issues, LGBTQ plus issues. Who's the bad guy? Who's the bad country? Who's more wrong this week or this month? Who's wronger than that person who was wrong before? Who's getting canceled for saying the wrong thing or having the wrong opinion? These people don't care about any of it. The only reason they pretend to care about any of it is if pretending to care and shaping policy around the things they pretend to care about benefits them. Now, this all ties back to something called stakeholder capitalism, a term most associated with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. So for decades, for a long time, the United States was operating under something called shareholder capitalism, where the primary responsibility of a business is to maximize profits for its shareholders and basically people who are invested in their company. That became the default operating model for large corporations in the United States for a long time. And this makes sense, right? If you're a business and you needed help getting started and people gave you a bunch of money, like 10 people gave you a bunch of money, they're kind of like sitting on the board of your business now, and you will want to make decisions that continue making money so that you can pay them back. And they basically are rewarded for having an interest in your business and in your success. But of course, it's not a perfect model. And I would invite any person who knows anything about business or economics or people to show me a model that is perfect. But that one, not perfect. But in 1971, Klaus Schwab founded what is now the World Economic Forum, and that same year he published a code of ethics for business leaders, and he emphasized their responsibility to society. He said that all companies should serve all stakeholders, not just shareholders. Okay, what does that mean? Well, imagine you and your friends start a pizza shop, And you have workers who help make the pizza. You have customers who buy the pizza. And you also have people living nearby, neighbors and members of the community in which the pizza shop resides. You all care about what happens to the pizza shop and at the pizza shop. Even if you all aren't necessarily financially invested, you all want the pizza shop to do well. And also to be a positive thing for the people who own it, the people who work there, the people who shop there, the people who live near there. You are all technically then stakeholders because you all have a stake in that pizza shop in some way. And that's the idea behind stakeholder capitalism. In the old system, the only thing that would matter is making as much money for the owners. So if the pizza ingredients were cheap and the workers weren't treated well and the shop got noisy and bothered the neighbors, none of that would really matter as long as you and your friends who own the pizza shop keep putting money in your pockets. So in theory, and in a perfect world, that utopia we go back to, stakeholder capitalism, this new model, it sounds great. Everyone gets a say. Everyone is happy. We're going to make decisions for the good of everyone, not just the owners of the pizza shop. So we are going to use high-quality ingredients when we make our pizzas, and we're going to pay our workers fairly and treat them well. We're going to be respectful of the neighborhood. We're still going to make money. Everyone gets what they want. Utopia abounds. World peace. No more depression. No more issues. No more crying children, no more stressed out parents. It's perfect. So here's where it gets tricky. The employees want high pay. The customers want cheap pizza. You still want to make money, but you can't do all of those things at the same time. And when everyone gets a say, who makes the final call? The owners, the workers, the customers? Well, I guess you'd have to vote. But what if there were 50 owners and 20 customers and 3 employees, then would the vote technically even still be considered a fair vote if there's an outnumbering of the stakeholders? Well, as it turns out, even in this promised utopia of stakeholder capitalism, it's still the people in charge, right? And it's still the people in charge who are making the decisions and benefiting. But if mistakes are made, if something bad happens, well, it's stakeholder capitalism. Everyone was involved in this. Who gets blamed? Who gets held accountable? That's where things get blurry, right? And the owners of the pizza shop, right, they can put up signs in their shop and they can say, we care about everyone. We care about the environment. We care about equality. We give money to causes that are important to this community. But they just put up the signs. They don't actually do anything. They don't show these claims in action. And they still choose to continue doing whatever makes them the most money. So obviously, we're talking about a little pizza shop. This doesn't even exist because it's just an example. But when we talk about big business, we all want corporate responsibility. We all want these big businesses to care about the issues that matter to us. But in the end, do they really? Spoiler alert, no, in my opinion. So the Business Roundtable is a group made up of CEOs from some of the largest companies in the United States, big tech, major banks, retail giants, industrial corporations. These are the people running companies that employ millions, influence the economy, and affect everyday life for everyone. So these CEOs get together and discuss economic and political issues like taxes, regulations, trade, labor policies, the list goes on. They don't make laws like the World Economic Forum, but they do advise policymakers and lobby the government, shaping how business and government interact. Remember the whole lobbying thing, because that's important. So in 2019, the Business Roundtable got together and made headlines when they released a statement saying that instead of companies existing to serve shareholders, which remember was the old model, they should now serve the stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, communities. This was a major endorsement of stakeholder capitalism, and these powerful CEOs, these powerful and wealthy CEOs, were doing something we hadn't really seen before. They were suddenly, turning cheek and saying, hey, there's more out there to care about than money. We care about you guys. And we were like, what? Thank you. Thank you so much. Then the following year, the World Economic Forum updated the Davos Manifesto to define stakeholder capitalism for the modern era. And this would focus on ESG metrics. That means environmental, social, and governance. Klaus Schwab called it a global economy that works for progress, people, and the planet. Really catchy alliteration. Companies then started saying, trust us. We're not just making money, we're being responsible. We care. We care about emissions and sustainability. We care about diversity and the little guy. We care about ethical leadership in our governments and big businesses. And this is when you start hearing companies say things like, we prioritize diversity and inclusion. We're committed to net zero emissions. Kind of like you putting signs up in your pizza shop that you care about the community and the people who live in it, but you didn't really mean any of this, right? You were just saying it so that like the community would be happy and vote your way. The community would be happy and vote your way because you said you cared. Did you mean it or were you just saying it? Did they mean it? Did these big businesses, Klaus Schwab and the Economic Business Roundtable and all of these hugely wealthy and powerful people who run these hugely wealthy and powerful businesses, when they came out and they said, we care about diversity and inclusion and we care about the environment, did they mean it or were they just saying it? I mean, this new stakeholder capitalism idea just really kind of started bubbling up around that 2019, 2020 COVID time. And that's when you saw these companies start saying these things and claiming these things. And I think that even in that short amount of time, we've already seen countless examples that prove to us that they didn't mean it, they were just saying it. For example, oil and energy companies like BP and Shell, they said they were investing in renewable energy and they were committed to reducing emissions. But most of their profits still come from oil and gas, and their renewable investments are a really small percentage of their total business. This is called greenwashing, appearing to be environmentally responsible while the core of the business remains the same, while profits still hold more importance than people and the planet. Let's look at social media companies like Meta and Google, who I think are the most egregious of this. We care about you guys, we care about people, we want everybody to be happy and have a utopic life, while in reality, they care about their bottom line, which has substantially increased. These social media companies, they say they're out there fighting misinformation, investing in diversity, and supporting mental health. Which is funny, but yes, that's what they say. In 2024, Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, that weirdo, he told the Senate Judiciary Committee that there's no link between social media and negative mental health outcomes amongst young people. And to support this claim, Zuckerberg referenced the American Psychological Association's 2023 Health Advisory on Social Media Use in Adolescence study. So the APA, they were like, hell no. Mark, get our names out of your mouth. We're not doing this with you today. They responded. And they made a whole article about it. I hope I remember to link it, but they wrote a whole article about it. And they said, quote, we agree with Zuckerberg when he said that it's important to look at the science. As psychologists, we have actually done so. And as APA's chief science officer and longtime researcher into the impact of social media on kids, I can say that Zuckerberg cherry-picked data to suit his purposes. The APA advisory, which was based on the best available science, showed that social media is related to psychological harm through online discrimination, prejudice, hate, and cyberbullying. Research also has found that young people face serious risks when they're exposed to content about self-harm, harm to others, or eating disorders. But what is key to know is that the advisory also outlined the science behind why certain features, functions, and content on social media can be harmful to young people whose brains have not yet fully developed. The potential for harm is baked into Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms if young people use them as intended. Counts of followers or likes exploit children's innate desire for social reward and their need to feel accepted by their peers. The endless scroll of posts challenges children's ability to limit their social media use and time spent on screens before brain development in neural inhibition centers have fully developed. Friending and direct messaging functions may expose minors to predators. Research also shows that ongoing engagement on social media platforms are the primary cause of youth sleep deprivation, which has substantial consequences for adolescents' mood, academic performance, and even the size and function of their brain. End quote. Now, the APA says that companies like Meta can do more to minimize harm for young people. This whole stakeholder thing that these companies and the World Economic Forum and the Davos conference where they all, stroke themselves and talk about how important they are and how much they care about people. These companies like Meta go to these conferences and they say that they have these ideals. and they're going to make changes for the better of people and planet and all of that stuff. Progress, people, planet. So the American Psychological Association is saying these companies, they have the ability to create real change for the betterment of the people, especially young people. And they said real change requires modifying these features and functions of the social media apps themselves, and that tech developers need to prioritize the psychological health of people and children more than they prioritize making a profit from the data they extract from us. That does sound like stakeholder capitalism in action, right? Saying, hey, we as the people, the stakeholders, and the American Psychological Association, we say that this isn't good and we would like you to change it. So can you do that? Because we matter, right? Our voice and our vote matters just as much as yours. Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't. These companies who pretend they are all for it, who say out loud that they care about us and the issues that matter to us, it turns out they don't. They just say it and continue harming the planet and damaging people to make money, a lot of money. Companies like Meta and Google publish ESG, remember, environmental social governance reports, saying they're focused on user safety and well-being and protecting minors, and they say they have added features like screen time reminders to help us, which is bullshit, and we all know it. We all know it. Because the truth is, we are all addicted to our screens. And this is especially damaging when it comes to the developing brain of a child. Across the U.S., there are now hundreds to thousands of lawsuits against companies like Meta, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube. These lawsuits claim that platforms are deliberately designed to be addictive, using intentional features like infinite scroll, autoplay, and notifications engineered to keep users hooked. Okay? And I know I'm on YouTube. I know. But listen, I make these long videos. You have to have an attention span and some critical thinking to watch them. So if you're here, all right, we're helping. We're helping I care about people. No, I'm kidding. I really do. But I'm not making this short, content that you just have to scroll through. Those are the problems. We can all admit that, even as adults, that we get on TikTok and we're scrolling, and before we know it, we're like, holy shit, 17 hours passed? What did I do with my life? Why haven't I slept? It's not good for us. And most of the time, it's all stupid. It's all stupid stuff that doesn't teach us anything or benefit us in any way. So these lawsuits also claim that the companies knew young users were vulnerable and how it could lead to things like depression, eating disorders, self-harm, suicide. And these lawyers are arguing something very specific, something we've heard before. These companies designed products that hook users neurologically, similarly to how addictive substances hook people chemically. Social media delivers repeated dopamine hits through likes, notifications, endless content. And just like the lawsuits of the past around opioids, the Sackler family would bring those back, these lawsuits are saying the same thing. The companies, Meta, all of these companies, they knew the risks, but they kept pushing the product. And why would they do that? Why would they do something like that when they care about us? They care about the environment and people and, progress. Why would they do that? Well, because you may think you're the user of this technology, and you are, but you're also the product. Your attention is the product. And that is what is most important to these social media companies. You don't pay for social media apps, right? You get them for free. But advertisers pay for them, and the product being sold is not only your attention, it's your behavior data. What do you watch? What do you like? What do you click on? What do you share? Algorithms are built to answer one question: what will keep this person here longer? And that often means promoting content that triggers strong emotions, feels highly personalized. Why does it feel highly personalized? Because they're getting your data. Not just Meta, the phone that you use, Apple, Microsoft, whatever. They're collecting your data. Everything you say, the conversations you have, the things that you care about, what you're shopping for. If you use ChatGPT as a diary, it knows a lot about you, right? It's all highly personalized on social media to keep you in this infinite scroll loop. So right now, there are 2 trials underway in Los Angeles and New Mexico, with countless more to come. Just like in 2024, Mark Zuckerberg is standing up there with a straight face, dying on the hill, still now claiming he still agrees with his previous statements that the existing body of scientific work has not proved that social media causes mental health harms. But let's go back to that American Psychological Association article calling Mark Zuckerberg out. They end the article with, quote, "How many more times will Zuckerberg apologize before real change is made?" End quote. Well, he's not really apologizing at this point, is he? He's doubling down. But in front of Congress and grieving parents whose children have been harmed online in many different ways, Mark Zuckerberg said, quote, "It's terrible. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered. And this is why we invest so much and are going to continue doing industry-leading efforts to make sure that no one has to go through the things your families have had to suffer." End quote. Bullshit. Bullshit. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't care about anyone. Allegedly, in my opinion. Besides, he probably cares about his family. Maybe, I don't know, he could be a robot. It seems to me that stakeholder capitalism is some massive Potemkin village. It's something that looks good on the surface, but hides a completely different reality. And critics of this system, the stakeholder system, they agree. They say the message can be all rainbows and butterflies, while the core business model remains the same. And yet, it sucks to be lied to while companies profit off of you. But the bigger issue is that this stakeholder capitalism actually expands corporate power while sounding benevolent. The old way we did things was that the governments made the rule and then the corporations had to follow them. And then the corporations were pretty open and honest. They were like, well, we're going to do what's in the best interest of our shareholders, the people who invest financially in our business and own, a stake of our company. They were at least upfront about not caring about us. And since these companies had the money to lobby government officials anyways, it didn't really always work out. So even though we were electing the government officials and we were hoping the government officials were making decisions for these businesses and about how they would run based on our best interest, it didn't always work because the companies, they got a lot of money and they're like, hey, lobbying. They're like, hey, maybe look the other way on this. Once again, we're going to talk more about it, but Monsanto and the way that they put pressure on the government and the EPA to basically say hey, let's just ignore studies that say that the chemical in Roundup causes cancer, even though there's thousands and thousands of people who are suing us right now, right? And the EPA, there's evidence of this. The EPA was like, yeah, we could do that. We'll talk about it. So that old model, the shareholder model, it didn't always work out. It wasn't perfect. But all of that shit's still happening. And now Klaus Schwab and the rest of them want everyone's hands in the pot with multi-stakeholder partnerships, which would basically bring together the private sector, which is businesses and corporations, and then governments brought together with the private sector, and then civil society brought together with the private sector and governments, all making decisions across all areas of global governments. And once again, that sounds great, except when you look at who has the seats at the actual table where the conversations are happening, it's not civil society. It's not us. They show us some cute little posts on YouTube, look what we talked about at the World Economic Forum, guys. A lot of those conversations are happening behind closed doors. A lot of those conversations, we will never know what is said. And we get a glimpse of that in the Epstein emails. And now this whole multi-stakeholder kind of model that Klaus Schwab and the rest of the elites want to bring in, it's part of what the World Economic Forum calls the Great Reset. And this means, quote, the government's voice would be one among many without always being the final arbiter, end quote. And that means don't worry if your elected officials don't have a lot of power in global decision making because we're giving you, the people, more power. And it's just not true. It's just not true because in this system, corporations are promoted to being official stakeholders in global decisions, the main stakeholders, actually. It is still the people who have the most money and the most pull. And we, the people, when before we at least had a little bit of say in what happened through the officials we decided to elect to government, maybe some of them were not corrupt, maybe some of them actually cared. Now no one is going to listen to us at all. They don't listen to us now. They just meet at these conferences and they say they care about, the environment, but they're taking private jets there with Svetlana and magic mushrooms. And they have these, elaborate, events that are super costly, and they're all these flying people across the world. They're all using private jets. They don't care about the environment. They're having private conversations that we will never be privy to. And they tell us they care about the environment and inclusion when they're doing nothing to actually prove that. In 2019, the UN and the World Economic Forum signed the Strategic Partnership Framework, reflecting a shift that moved away from government-led decisions and toward shared decision-making with corporations. And Harry Glackman, our researcher on global governance, says this is alarming because it makes it sound like everyone has equal input, but they don't, because corporations have money, access, and influence. And he's identified more than 45 global multi-stakeholder groups that will set standards and establish guidelines and rules in a range of areas. He said, quote, "These groups lack any democratic accountability. They consist of private stakeholders, big corporations, who recruit their friends in government, civil society, and universities to join them in solving public problems." End quote. And this affects everything from food to big tech to energy to public health. The power has shifted from rules made by governments where citizens at least marginally had indirect control through voting to private actors and hybrid institutions that are making all the decisions while they pat us on the head and tell us to go make our finger paintings. Harry Glackman says we are creating systems that shape global rules without the safeguards that usually come with domestic governance. And as we have seen, when these big corporations make decisions that now affect us all, they aren't basing those decisions off of some care or respect for us. They're basing the decision off of what puts the most money in their pockets, even if it hurts us. Like Monsanto. That is what Klaus Schwab and Microsoft and Apple and Meta and banks and oil corporations and all of these people, all these other people, that's what they do when they get together to talk every year. This is what they're talking about, decisions that make them more money, and they don't care what happens to us, honestly. And the people who were chatting to Jeffrey Epstein, they also went to these conferences. They also had a say in these decisions. They were chatting to him about population and control while taking his private planes to these conferences. These people who have acknowledged that AI is going to turn us all into jobless, useless globs without any real purpose or benefit to those who are actually calling the shots. So it's like, when will this population control thing start to happen? Has it already happened? There are bigger, connected conversations to be had about the huge corporations who benefit from this new normal, the most wealthy and powerful people who have decided it's the direction we're taking, like BlackRock and, the other kind of, what are they called? The big three. And corporations who have been pretending to do the right thing while secretly pulling strings in government to lie to our faces, like Monsanto and Bayer, the ways we have all been completely devastated, while those on the top manage to not only survive, but thrive. Think the 2008 stock market crash. But that's going to have to wait for another episode because we have to move forward right now. Still on the same path, but traveling to a different place. I saw a video from a guy, and it doesn't matter who he is, but he talks about how he is the child of a billionaire, and he's been accused of being a Nepo baby and all that jazz. But because of his parentage and the way he grew up and the world he grew up in, he understands how things really work. He said, quote, "Politics operate very much like a social club with a social hierarchy. At the very top, there are the billionaires who write 9-figure checks to the puppet class, also known as politicians, who in return give the billionaire class undying loyalty on the issues that matter to them most. The most important thing for you to drill into your head to really understand the story is you may look at a President Obama, for example, and think that he is at the top of the social pyramid. That is absolutely not true. When there are these private dinner meetings with billionaires and with past presidents or potential future presidents or even a current president, they are at the very bottom of the barrel. If you were to compare it to the social hierarchy of a high school, for example, the billionaire is the superintendent of the entire school board, and a President Obama, for example, is like the president of the student council. He actually has no power over the school whatsoever. It's completely performative. Every single time you've ever voted, you are really voting for someone that was handpicked for you by a billionaire who doesn't want to run themselves because they are busy ruining the planet. And honestly, being a politician is seen in these social circles at these dinner parties as a very lowly job. So in summary, every single person who has made it to the level of vice president or a president is nothing but a billionaire's bitch. End quote. So as I was writing this script, it was March 16th, and just the day before, The Guardian posted an article. And that article was titled, "America Needs a Movement to Curb Billionaires' Power." And this is true, but it goes so far past America. It is the world. The Guardian article states, quote, Not a day goes by without some news about billionaires throwing their weight around to bend the system in their favor, or about politicians giving them tax cuts, government contracts, or pardons. In today's new Gilded Age, about 900 plus billionaires in the U.S. have far too much influence over our elections, our economy, our government policies, and our news media, end quote. This is all absolutely true, and it's a very interesting article that we will probably come back to as we go through this twisted web, but it's not just today. This has been happening forever. But what does this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein, you're asking? Everything, my friend, everything. Because how did Jeffrey Epstein even become a person who had access to money and other people who had money? Honestly, we have no idea, because the man had no resume or pedigree or polish to speak of. Jeffrey Epstein was born in Brooklyn, New York. He grew up in a working class neighborhood to working class parents. His father, Seymour, worked for the New York City Parks Department. His mother, Pauline, was a school aide. And there was no evidence of inherited wealth, powerful family connections, elite social standing, nothing. Epstein attended Lafayette High School in Brooklyn. He briefly attended Cooper Union and then New York University, but he never finished. He never completed and got a degree. Despite this, his first documented professional job was teaching math and physics at the Dalton School, an elite Manhattan prep school where he was reportedly hired by Dalton's headmaster, Donald Barr, in 1967. So we've talked about this before in our previous Epstein videos from years back. We went through his whole background. If you want a refresher on that, I'll link them. But yeah. Despite this, his first documented professional job was teaching math and physics at the Dalton School, which was an elite Manhattan prep school where he was reportedly hired by Dalton's headmaster, Donald Barr. Now, we went through all of this in our earlier Epstein videos from years ago. If you need a refresher, I'll link everything. But yeah, it's all weird. It's all weird and all connected. Now, in 1967, Epstein left Dalton and joined investment bank Bear Stearns, once again, without a college degree or any known experience in the finance world. He started as a junior assistant on the trading floor, and within a few years, he had moved into the firm's special products division, which handled complex tax strategies and wealth management for very wealthy clients. By the early 1980s, Epstein had become a limited partner at the firm, which was an unusually rapid rise for anybody, much less someone like him. But in 1981, he suddenly left Bear Stearns under unclear circumstances. Epstein then founded his own financial advisory company called J. Epstein and Company, where he claimed the firm specialized in managing money only for billionaires, and that is where Leslie Wexner entered the chat. The relationship between Leslie Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein is one of the most important and most mysterious parts of Epstein's rise to wealth and influence. Wexner was essentially Epstein's only publicly known billionaire client, and their relationship helped transform Epstein from a relatively obscure financial advisor into someone who appeared to be extraordinarily wealthy. Les Wexner built his fortune through the retail company that eventually became L Brands, which owned several major clothing chains. By the mid-1980s, the Limited had grown into a massive retail empire. Wexner had expanded this empire aggressively through acquisitions. In 1982, Wexner purchased Victoria's Secret, which later became one of the most profitable lingerie brands in the world. By the time Leslie Wexner met Jeffrey Epstein, his net worth was estimated to be around $1 to $2 billion in 1980s money. And Jeffrey Epstein was no one. He didn't have a long track record or any legitimate resume to prove he was competent in managing large fortunes. Yet, Les Wexner hired Epstein and began putting an extraordinary amount of trust in him. By the time Epstein was done with Wexner, Epstein would become the gatekeeper of Wexner's financial affairs. He had Wexner's power of attorney, and he was the owner of Wexner's massive Manhattan townhouse, the very same one that Karina Shuliak was left in Epstein's will. Now, there were claims that Wexner had given the townhouse to Epstein or sold it to him for $1, but Les Wexner has always denied this and said the townhouse was sold to Epstein for what he had been told was the fair appraised value. And in the newly released files, we do see evidence that Epstein purchased that townhouse in 1998 for $20 million through a corporation. He initially paid $10 million up front and then paid the remaining installments through March of 2000. Now, in 2007, as Epstein was being accused of soliciting prostitution in Florida from teenagers, Les Wexner conducted a review of his finances. And he said this revealed that Jeffrey Epstein had stolen money from him, and from that point on, he had no contact with Epstein. Wexner said that Epstein returned a substantial amount of this money, but in light of his guilty plea and his deception, Wexner completely severed ties with Epstein. So how much money Epstein stole from Les Wexner, we have no idea, and accounts have varied over time. Initially, Wexner said that Epstein had misappropriated more than $46 million of his personal fortune. In the newly released files, there's a December 2019 DOJ memo which revealed that Wexner's attorneys had determined the theft was much larger, amounting to hundreds of millions of dollars. Representative Robert Garcia has argued that Wexner played a much larger and central role in financing Epstein, saying, quote, "There is no single person that was more involved in providing Jeffrey Epstein with the financial support to commit his crimes than Les Wexner. To be very clear, we know that approximately over $1 billion was either transferred, provided in stocks, or given directly to Mr. Epstein by Wexner," end quote. So maybe Epstein stole some money from Les Wexner. Maybe he misappropriated some of Les Wexner's funds. Les Wexner maybe gave him a bunch of money. We don't know exactly what happened between these two men, how much money was given, how much money was taken, but the greater question is, why would Les Wexner, who was a self-made billionaire by the time he met Jeffrey Epstein, who was, like I said, really nothing, Epstein was nothing, why would this billionaire give Jeffrey Epstein so much access to his money, including giving him power of attorney? Which is bananas to me. So on February 18th, 2026, Les Wexner gave a statement to the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. And he said, quote, "Let me state from the start, I was naive, foolish, and gullible to put any trust in Jeffrey Epstein. He was a con man, and while I was conned, I have done nothing wrong and have nothing to hide," end quote. Here is a clip, actually, from Les Wexner's deposition before the House Oversight Committee. It's very clear that Les wants us all to understand that he was duped. And it's very clear that Les Wexner's lawyer wants him to shut the hell up.
I think I'm giving a long answer, but to understand in context, because if I just say yes or no, you won't understand it. And I really want this whole group to understand it. And I never would have guessed I was being conned. Never, ever. The deceit was so subtle. Yes, I know.
Answer the question.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure we all appreciate the stories. We're just trying to answer the questions they actually wanted the answers.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you. I hope it is, but I wouldn't have had the idea. But then all the things were inventoried. That wasn't work for me or Jeffrey. It was just regularly done.
Answer the question. It's okay. Answer the question.
Okay.
I will fucking kill you if you answer another question with more than 5 words, okay? I mean, the words the lawyer said to Les Wexner themselves are chilling. But what is more chilling is the calm way the attorney said them, with a friendly hand on Les Wexner's shoulder and a non-threatening smile on his face, I think not realizing the mic was going to pick up that threat. And Les Wexner just laughing it off like he's used to it. Like it's not the most bizarre, weird, disrespectful, and violent thing to say. I will kill you if you answer another question with more than 5 words. Now, you could say this was his lawyer protecting him, not wanting him to say things that would incriminate himself. That is probably true. Maybe it's also the lawyer not wanting Wexner to say anything that could potentially incriminate someone else or multiple someone else's. So let's examine what Wexner revealed during this testimony, because I think it gives some very serious insight into how Epstein managed to gain the access he had to Wexner, and it gives us insight into who the early players were that introduced Epstein to the world that would allow him to commit his crimes and do God knows what else at this point. We're just getting started, figuring out what Epstein was doing and what he did. All right, so Les Wexner said he was introduced to Epstein in the mid to late 80s by Bob Meester, the former vice chairman of Aon. He said Bob knew that he needed help managing his personal finances and suggested that he speak to Epstein. So Bob suggested to Les Wexner that he speak to Epstein. What is Aon and who's Bob Meester? Well, Aon is the second largest insurance broker worldwide. They are ranked 300th on the Fortune 500, and they have a history of controversy regarding how they received payments from insurance companies. In the simplest terms, Aon doesn't usually sell insurance themselves. They are the middleman between companies and insurance companies, helping businesses figure out what risks they face and then arranging insurance coverage for those risks. So in theory, a broker like Aon should help a company find the best insurance deal, right? You're working for the company. But no, they're the middleman between the company and the insurance companies. Because as we come to find out, some insurance companies were secretly paying brokers at Aon extra commissions if the broker steered clients, the businesses, towards them. These are what we call contingent commissions. And this created a conflict, obviously, because the broker might recommend the insurer that paid them the most, getting kickbacks and stuff. They might not recommend the best one for the client, because Aon's job is to look at the business, assess like what's best for them, what threats they have, what weaknesses they have, and then give them the insurance company that's best for that analysis. That's not what was happening. So in 2004, the New York Attorney General, Elliot Spitzer, launched a major investigation into the insurance brokerage industry. He accused several large firms, including Aon, of bid rigging and steering clients to insurers that paid kickbacks. Aon denies wrongdoing, but ultimately agreed to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements. Now, even though most people have never heard of it, Aon is extremely influential, and that's because insurance sits behind almost every major industry in the world. Without insurance, airlines can't fly, oil companies can't drill, construction projects can't start, et cetera, et cetera. You see what I'm saying? Aon helps design the financial safety nets that allow large industries to operate. So Les Wexner said Bob Meester suggested Epstein, and Bob Meester says that he suspects Epstein got befriended to him in the 1980s to get close to his billionaire friends, including Les Wexner. So in 2021, Bob Meester spoke to Vanity Fair and explained how this whole relationship came to be. He said he had met Epstein on a commercial flight to Palm Beach, and at first he was impressed with the young banker. The two, they chatted. They were like, let's meet up. They started playing racquetball together, taking steams together at the gym where they would chat, and during one of these conversations, Epstein asked Bob to introduce him to Les Wexner. Now, Bob claims that Epstein lied and said that he had gained knowledge that Wexner's current money manager was stealing from Wexner, and Epstein was like, I'm a financial bounty hunter, and I can recover those stolen funds. Send me in. Send me in, coach. So Bob Meester arranged a meeting between Wexner and Epstein at Wexner's place in Aspen, of course. Of course, you have to go to Aspen to have a business meeting. Now, how did Bob Meester come to believe that Epstein was legit or somebody he should introduce to a billionaire like Les Wexner? Who knows? He doesn't say. He just says that Epstein was a liar, and he claims that soon after he introduced Epstein to Wexner, he began to hear disturbing stories about Epstein's sexual proclivities. Bob Meester said, quote, think of whatever the worst thing anyone could do is, and Epstein did them all, end quote. Bob Meester claims the final straw came when Epstein showed up unannounced to Meester's Park Avenue apartment with 5 models, and he presented them to Bob Meester for his sexual entertainment. Meester said, quote, Epstein thought he was bringing me a gift. I told him, get the fuck out, and I never want to see you again, end quote. Bob Meester then claimed that he warned Les Wexner about Epstein. He begged Wexner, and others begged Wexner not to get too involved with Epstein, but it was too late because Wexner had already hired Epstein as his financial advisor, and he thought Epstein was brilliant and amazing and fantastic. So Les Wexner said, don't worry, it wasn't just Bob Meester. whose recommendation he relied on to get involved with Jeffrey Epstein. He also said that he had consulted Ace Greenberg and Jimmy Kane of Bear Stearns, and they both endorsed Epstein without hesitation. Now, these were two figures who were instrumental in creating the culture of subprime mortgages that left millions of Americans with no homes, no jobs, and their life savings decimated. But as I said, that will be included in a discussion when we talk about the other things like BlackRock and the Big Three in another installment. I wish we could just talk for hours and hours and hours because once again, everything's connected. So it's hard to not pull off the path and go down that path, but I'm trying to stay focused. Are you proud of me? I'm trying. Les Wexner also said that Epstein offered him a very respectable reference, Ellie de Rothschild. Wexner said, quote, "When I spoke to Ellie, he highly recommended Epstein based upon work Epstein had done for his family," end quote. Now remember, this was the 80s, but Les Wexner is not the only person who had connected the Rothschild family to Jeffrey Epstein. So it's not just like Les Wexner's over here a few months ago in 2026 and he's like, Ellie de Rothschild, and now everyone's like, oh, Epstein and the Rothschild. No, these are much deeper connections. Let's talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Daughter of disgraced British media tycoon Robert Maxwell. And Ghislaine is now sitting in a minimum security prison in Texas due to her ties to Jeffrey Epstein. At least allegedly it's her sitting in the cell at this point. I don't even know. I would believe anything at this point. Now I'm going to tell you the connections between Epstein and the Rothschild family. And then we'll talk about them more in depth after introducing the players in this game. So on July 24th, 2025, Ghislaine Maxwell was interviewed by the Department of Justice. And this was basically for the reasons to see if she had information about other people connected to Epstein's crimes. The government wants to know, hey, are you going to talk? You've been sitting in prison for a while. Do you have anything to say? Now, during that interview, Maxwell said, quote, "I know that he, Epstein, helped Lynn Forrester, who became Lynn de Rothschild. She'll deny it, and she has, but she can't," end quote. When asked what kind of help Epstein provided to Lynn Forrester, Maxwell said, quote, "Well, I have no idea what he did for her. I know he helped her financially. Her husband was the controller of New York," end quote. Ghislaine Maxwell is not the only person who has connected Lynn Forrester, formerly Lynn de Rothschild, to Jeffrey Epstein. In 2019, Alan Dershowitz went on News Nation and he started throwing out people's names.
There are people whose names should be disclosed. I'll give you a couple of examples. The lady Rothschild, who introduced me to Jeffrey Epstein, and we think introduced Bill Clinton to Jeffrey Epstein and maybe Prince Andrew. Her name hasn't come up at all, and yet she was as close to Jeffrey Epstein as anybody could possibly be during the period of time when he was doing some of these things. So that's a name that should be disclosed.
As we know or should know, Alan Dershowitz was part of Jeffrey Epstein's legal team. He helped negotiate Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, the Sweetheart Deal, and he has been accused in civil claims related to Epstein. He strongly denied all allegations. He has not been criminally charged with anything, and while there is definitely more to discuss when it comes to Alan Dershowitz, we can't do that right now because we're on a mission. Stay focused. All right, Dershowitz says that Lynn Forrester, Lynn de Rothschild, introduced him to Epstein. He said maybe she introduced Epstein to Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew. He said she was as close to Epstein as anyone could be. Ghislaine Maxwell has also said that it was Lynn Forrester who introduced Epstein to Prince Andrew. Maxwell said that it was a flat untruth that it was her who had introduced Epstein to Andrew or his wife, Sarah Ferguson, because people have said that. She said, no, it's Lynn Forrester who made the love match in the early 2000s between Epstein and Prince Andrew. Maxwell said, quote, she had a house or rented a house in the Vineyard. I think it was in the Vineyard or Nantucket. I invited Epstein to go, and I believe that's when he met Prince Andrew, end quote. She's talking about Martha's Vineyard when she says the Vineyard. That's how wealthy people talk about Martha's Vineyard. They call it the Vineyard. So Ghislaine Maxwell also said in this interview with law enforcement, she said, I don't know how Bill Clinton and Epstein met. Clinton was my friend, not Epstein's friend. And she says pretty much she didn't introduce them. So Bill Clinton was actually asked about this during his recent deposition in February of 2026.
During Ms. Maxwell's interview, she stated that President Clinton was her friend, not Epstein's friend. Is that accurate?
I'd say that it was accurate to say that I felt closer to her than him.
And for the record, why was that?
Because I had seen her more, and because she was very good friends with Evelyn Rothschild and his wife Lynn, whom I knew and was in regular touch with.
So Bill Clinton said that Lynn Forrester de Rothschild was very good friends with Ghislaine, and he knew and was in touch regularly with Lynn and her husband. We also know that Jeffrey Epstein would eventually be connected and ingrained to top players at Microsoft, not just Bill Gates, but Nathan Myhrvold and other people, and these relationships opened doors for Epstein that he normally wouldn't have even been able to knock on. Now, it looks like Jeffrey Epstein met Nathan Myhrvold in 1996 when Nathan threw a gala at the Seattle Zoo for Stephen Hawking, another name that we know is heavily involved in the Epstein files. Now, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild was an invited guest to that gala, and she brought as her plus one a Mr. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was seated next to Linda Stone, a former technology research executive at Microsoft, and from there, Epstein cultivated relationships with Stone, Myhrvold, Steven Sinofsky, and Reid Hoffman, all important high-up people at Microsoft, who would stay in touch with him even after he left prison in 2009, even as he went through his life to his next prison sentence, and obviously through these people and, through Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, probably he's going to be introduced to Bill Gates. And Jeffrey Epstein's connections to these respected executives helped him after his, getting out of prison in 2009. They helped him return to society. They helped him have those doors opened up for him. We will talk about this more deeply in future installments, like I said. So Alan Dershowitz claims that Lynn introduced him to Epstein in Martha's Vineyard. He said, quote, "She tells me he's this fascinating guy, big donor to Harvard. He wants to meet you. I said no, but she pleaded with me, told me how important he was. She was his social pimp. Then he asked me to introduce him to people as well," end quote. So before we talk about who Lynn Forrester is and how true these claims could be, let's see what she has had to say about these allegations. So after Dershowitz dropped Lynn Forrester de Rothschild's name on News Nation in 2019, her spokesperson told Vanity Fair that it was 100% false, that Epstein had given Lynn financial help after her divorce from her second husband, Andrew Stein. 100% false. Okay, so I guess we should get some background on Lynn now. Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, born in Bergen, New Jersey. Her father, John Kenneth Forrester, was the owner and president of General Aviation Aircraft, now Meridian. She studied at Pomona College and Columbia Law School before studying international law on a Rotary Fellowship at the Geneva Graduate Institute in Switzerland. She married her first husband, Alexander Hartley Platt, great-grandson of Helen Hartley Jenkins, New York philanthropist and welfare worker, and the great-great-grandson of Marcellus Hartley, financier and philanthropist of New York. So this wedding happened in May of 1978, and who knows what went on there and how long it lasted. But in March of 1983, Lynn was tying the knot with Andrew Stein, a New York politician and son of Jerry Finkelstein, a multimillionaire businessman who was also an extremely powerful political insider. Finkelstein created a lot of his influence through newspapers and media. He was a publisher at the New York Post. He ran the New York Daily News. In New York politics, he was known as a kingmaker. He used his media savvy and his connections to boost certain politicians, and he helped get candidates elected, including his own son, right? So at the time of their marriage, Stein had already been a member of the New York State Assembly. He'd been elected borough president of the Manhattan borough, which gave him a ton of political power and pull. And Lynn was working for the telecommunications billionaire John Kluge, who was one of the most powerful and rich businessmen in the United States at that time, ranked number one by Forbes in 1990. So Kluge built his company, Metro Media, into a huge company that owned independent television stations, radio stations, and billboards. And in the 1980s, he sold major parts of Metro Media's TV assets to New Corporation in a deal that helped the Fox Broadcasting Company get off the ground, leading to the creation of the Fox network. Now, he was married to Patricia Kluge, a British-born American socialite. After their divorce in 1990, Patricia established Kluge Estate Winery and Vineyard in Virginia. Now, the estate and winery went up for sale after the business declared bankruptcy, and they would eventually be purchased by Donald Trump and rebranded as Trump Winery. On February 10th, 2011, Epstein emailed someone named Paul Prosperi, telling him that he thought the Cluj property in Virginia was going to auction the following week, and saying they should get the details. Prosperi replied, quote, "I have heard some things about it. B of A has a note on the house and the land across the street now subdivided into lots, a few acres each, called Vineyard Estates. Farm Credit Bank has notes on winery and equipment. Trump has tried to make a deal with the lenders but didn't. He may bid. I'll find out current status," end quote. In November of 2010, Epstein was emailing with Jess Staley, who is someone important we're going to eventually talk about in great detail. But what you need to know now is that Jess Staley has been a longtime banker with JP Morgan and then Barclays, and it appears that Epstein had pulled some strings and made some calls to help Staley's daughter Alexa get into Columbia University. This was just the first step, because Epstein would take a huge interest and help Alexa Staley a lot for years. He really did seem to have a special interest in her growth and her academic growth specifically. And listen, I'm not saying that Alexa Staley wasn't smart or didn't deserve it, but that's a conversation for another day. Anyways, in November of 2010, Jess Staley emailed Epstein saying that Alexa, his daughter, was calling Cookie Neal, director for science development at Columbia, to tell her the GRE scores. And Epstein replied, quote, "John Kluge gave $4 billion to the school. Will you relax?" End quote. Now, Kluge didn't quite give Columbia $4 billion, but he did give them over $510 million, which is still a lot. Now, what relationship did Epstein have with John Kluge, where he felt that this amount of money donated to the school would help Jess Staley's daughter get in, right? Like, what was that of a benefit to Epstein? Did Epstein meet Lynn Forster de Rothschild through John Kluge? If so, we're talking about, in 1990, Forbes #1 richest person, okay? It's weird. It's weird. How does he know John Kluge, and how does he think that John's, financial endowments to a certain college are going to help Epstein get Jess Staley's daughter into that college? Anyway, Lynn Forster de Rothschild told the New York Times a few years back that she had met Epstein at a reception for George Mitchell, the Senate Majority Leader and Epstein's friend. Now, Mitchell served in this position from 1989 to 1995, so it's likely that this reception would have happened sometime in the mid to late 80s. So, did Epstein meet Lynn Forster de Rothschild, who introduced her to John Kluge, who she would stay close with forever, by the way? They were, even after she moved on and she did her own thing, they were very close. They had a friendship. I don't know what kind of relationship they had, but they were close, and they seemed to care about each other and respect each other a lot. So maybe she introduced Epstein to John Kluge, and that's why she's continuing to introduce him to other powerful people as she goes on along in her life and her career, like Prince Andrew. We'll see. So anyways, while Lynn Forster de Rothschild's working for John Kluge and he's creating this whole empire, this telecommunications empire, she became the VP for development at Metro Media from 1984 to 1989. And that's when she and Andrew Stein would, they'd meet, they'd get married, they'd go on to have 2 sons together, and then Lynn would build her resume and wallet steadily over the following years. She invested in telecom businesses in North America and Europe in partnership with Motorola. Between 1985 and 1995, she was the majority shareholder, chairman, and CEO of TPI Communications International in Latin America, which was owned by Motorola. In 1995, she founded FirstMark Communications in the U.S. This was a broadband wireless company, but then 2 years later, she sold her U.S. interests. And in 1998, she founded FirstMark Communications in Europe, which built fiber networks in 15 countries. So that company was sold in June of 2000 for $1 billion, the largest private equity placement in the history of the European telecommunications sector. And while she's doing all of that, Lynn Forster Rothschild served on President Bill Clinton's National Information Infrastructure Advisory Council from 1993 to 1995, and she served on the U.S. Secretary of Energy's Advisory Committee from 1998 to 2000. Now, Lynn had donated to all of Bill and Hillary Clinton's federal races since 1992. She was very close friends with the couple, and it was right around 1993 when her then-husband Andrew Stein ran unsuccessfully for the mayor of New York City. And this is when the marriage between Andrew Stein and Lynn seemed to end. And also right around the time that she had been appointed to a White House advisory commission by the president, Bill Clinton. So this is allegedly when people claim Epstein helped Lynn retain the millions of dollars Lynn had made through her smart business deals that would now be considered marital property and up for grabs in a divorce. A source told the New York Times that Epstein called one of Andrew Stein's lawyers and claimed that Lynn had given him the power and permission to negotiate on her behalf, and he demanded that Lynn, as the primary breadwinner, should walk away with the greater share of the assets. So maybe when Ghislaine Maxwell said Epstein helped Lynn financially, she didn't mean he gave her money during the divorce, because why would Lynn need money? She's like loaded by this point, right? She's built companies, sold them, she's doing great. Maybe Ghislaine Maxwell meant that he helped Lynn keep some of her money. And as it turns out, as we will find, this is what Epstein has done for a few members of the Rothschild family. If that is what he did with Lynn Forster Rothschild, I don't know. But yeah, as it turns out, this is what he would eventually do as well for Ariane de Rothschild, who was, as of a few months ago, really the most powerful person in the Rothschild family, in the banking family. But since her ties to Epstein have come out, things have, become a little questionable. But anyways, yes, it seems like this is what he's doing. He's making deals where he's like, I can save you a lot of money, but I want some of that money. Fair enough. Okay. Now, Lynn Forster Rothschild told the Times that she had no idea who Epstein had contacted or why he would have thought he was empowered to do anything on her behalf. That is what she's saying. That is her official statement about that, okay? Lynn also claims that she cut ties with Epstein in 2000 after he deceived her on a property transaction. And she said, quote, I was a very small part of Epstein's life and he was a blip on mine, end quote. Now, that's not true. I just want to say, well, I don't know. I guess it's subjective, whatever. Maybe Lynn she clearly has a very big, full life. And so maybe she considers her relationship with Jeffrey Epstein to be like the small blip. But I mean, I don't know. So according to White House visitor logs, Jeffrey Epstein visited several times to the White House during the Clinton presidency, 17 times to be exact. Epstein had donated $1,000 to Clinton's campaign in 1991. Clinton took over as president on January 20th, 1993, at which point Epstein wrote another check, $10,000 this time, to the White House Historical Association. They're responsible for making it's like a private association or like a private charity, and they make, I think, improvements or whatever to the White House residents. I can't remember. I've learned so much. But either way, after that, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were invited to a donors reception at the White House on September 29th, 1993. There they were photographed with Bill Clinton. And then between that reception and 1995, Epstein was there at least 17 more times. Now, we know that Hillary Clinton just also testified, and she was asked very directly, have you ever met Jeffrey Epstein? Because we know Bill Clinton did. And she's like, no, I have never met this man. And she could be telling the truth. But it wasn't just that Bill Clinton flew on the Lolita Express, and it wasn't just that Bill Clinton went to Epstein's Island. It was that Jeffrey Epstein, was at the White House 17 times that we know of, right? There could have been other visits that were not documented, but we know there were 17 documented times. We know that. So maybe Hillary wasn't home. Maybe she was very busy too, and she had things going on, a very big, full life, like her friend Lynn Forster de Rothschild. Or Linda Rothschild Forster, whatever. Very big, full life. So maybe those 17 times she wasn't home, and that was specifically designed to where she wouldn't be there when Jeffrey Epstein came over. But I'm just telling you, it was a lot. So there's a letter available as part of the Clinton Library Archives that shows Lynn Forrester de Rothschild writing to Bill Clinton personally, thanking him for their talk about Jeffrey Epstein and currency stabilization. So did Jeffrey Epstein get to go to the White House because he wrote $10,000 check to Bill Clinton? Or did Lynn Forrester de Rothschild arrange some of these visits to the White House? She says no. She says she has no recollection of having anything to do with Epstein being there. But how did he get there? Like, during this one donor dinner, did Epstein charm Bill Clinton so much that Bill Clinton was like, come over anytime, my friend, come to the White House. Like, just do it. We would love to have you. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe in those early days, maybe Lynn Forrester Rothschild arranged it, because we know she's writing to the president directly saying, thanks for our talk about Jeffrey Epstein. What? Anyways, we will come back to the Clintons, but for now, back to Lynn Forrester, who in 2000 would become Lynn Forrester de Rothschild when she married Sir Evelyn de Rothschild in London after he divorced his previous wife that same year. Reportedly, Lynn and Rothschild were introduced by Henry Kissinger at the 1998 Bilderberg Group conference in Scotland, and the new couple were invited by the Clintons to spend their honeymoon at the White House. In 2006, Lynn was appointed as a member of the UN Advisories Group on Inclusive Financial Services. Why do all of these committees and job titles and everything, they're so long and stupid and unnecessary, and I think it's intentionally to confuse us. What does it even mean? Advisors Group on Inclusive Financial Services. I know I'm going to look it up, and it's going to be something stupid that is absolutely, Lynn was trying to figure out how to give everybody an Apple Watch in Haiti or something like that. I'm being tongue in cheek. I'm just being funny. I'm sure it was very important work, but why do they have to be so long and complicated? And why are there so many different departments and different job titles and job roles? And it's confusing on purpose. So now she's the member of the UN Advisors Group on Inclusive Financial Services. So she leaves the White House and the private sector, I guess, which would be business, and she's working for the UN now, the United Nations. But she stayed close to Bill and Hillary. She supported Hillary when Hillary ran for Democratic presidential nominee. Weirdly enough, when Hillary lost that bid in 2008 to Barack Obama, Lynn switched her support to Republican John McCain and then openly attacked Obama, who had gotten the Democratic nomination. She went ham, okay? In several interviews, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild went off on Obama.
I said that comment was because, to me, Barack Obama was more like the guy at the cocktail party with the leather jacket on and the cigarette, hanging out, looking down at everyone. That's my read of him, not to take anything away from his wonderful life story, his true dedication to creating the America that he believes we should be. I don't take anything away from him.
But do you think his style might be too didactic for you? Because, this is a guy who could have been a professor at the University of Chicago, a law professor, and he's a kind of professor president. So perhaps that's what you're misreading by when you say he thinks he's better than others and knows. Because, very few people really have. Who has said that? Apart from you.
Well, Harry Reid wrote a biography and talked about how Barack Obama made a very good. Harry Reid, who is the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, he wrote a biography about when Barack Obama first came to the Senate, and he made a speech, and he did a wonderful job of making everyone in the room believe that he agreed with all of them. And Harry Reid said, "You did a good job," and Obama tapped him and said, "I've got a gift."
Okay,
so he claims he's bipartisan, but he picks people off.
And that's the reason why you don't like him. And you think McCain and Sarah Palin would have been more bipartisan than that, and that's why you back them?
Oh, everyone has suffered.
Exactly.
Everyone has suffered. But Barack Obama has taken our deficit to 13.2% of GDP. Because here in Britain, you are crucifying Gordon Brown for having a 6% of GDP deficit.
Lynn continued to talk shit about Obama for the next 4 years of his presidency. She also stayed close and talked to Hillary Clinton often via email and stuff, which is funny because when you look at it, it's like oh, the Clintons and the Obamas, like, we thought they were good with each other. You know, like, we thought they were on the same side and they were friends. None of them are friends and all of them are friends, if that makes sense. None of them are friends and all of them are friends. They don't like each other. They don't agree with each other. They all just work towards a common goal that is not what is good for us, if that makes sense. So also in July of 2013, it looks like Epstein's assistant, Leslie Groff, good old Leslie, she sent Peter Mandelson an email with the subject, photograph from Jeffrey Epstein. And Peter replied, he was like, where was this taken? And Leslie wrote back, quote, hi, Peter, I'm not sure, but it might be Jeffrey's Island. I sent J.E. a note asking, end quote. Mandelson wrote back, quote, I think it was Martha's the first time I met Jeffrey staying with Lynn Forrester, ... end quote. Leslie wrote back, your guess is probably better than mine. So, I mean, Peter Mandelson, guys, Lord Mandelson, we have so much to talk about. So we have allegations now that the Prince Andrew / Jeffrey Epstein romance was facilitated by Lynn Forrester Rothschild. And this is pretty much an admittance from Mandelson that he met Epstein through Lynn Forrester de Rothschild. Lord Mandelson, very important person in the UK who's been getting into a lot of trouble because of his ties to Epstein. Since marrying into the Rothschild family, Lynn got even more busy than she was before. She's a chair of E.L. Rothschild, a holding company that manages investments in The Economist Group, owner of The Economist magazine, Congressional Quarterly, and The Economist Intelligence Unit, E.L. Rothschild LP, a leading independent wealth management firm in the U.S. She serves on the board of directors of Estee Lauder, The Economist Group, Bronfman, E.L. Rothschild LP, and Christie's International. She's a trustee of the Aranda Foundation, which is a Rothschild family foundation, the Outward Bound Trust, the Alfred Herrhausen Society of International Dialogue of Deutsche Bank, and the Global Commercial Microfinance Consortium Advisory Board of Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank, very important when we talk about Epstein too. So we have Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, who had connections with rich people and high up political figures, and like high up political figures, not just in the United States, but, you know, overseas in the UK due to her Rothschild marriage. But she had important connections before she even married a Rothschild. And she introduced Jeffrey Epstein to all of these other people, including Peter Mandelson, who we'll talk more about later. She got his foot in the door at Microsoft, allegedly. But this is also not where Epstein's Rothschild connections end, and certainly not where they started. Because remember, Les Wexner said that it was the 1980s when L.E.D. Rothschild gave him a glowing recommendation for Epstein because of how much Epstein had helped the family. And that wasn't even the longest or closest relationship Epstein had with a Rothschild. So to unpack this, we have to really understand the Rothschild family, where they came from, how much power and wealth they have accumulated. But this is also not where Epstein's Rothschild connections end, and certainly not where they started, because remember, Les Wexner said that it was the 1980s when L.E.D. Rothschild gave him a glowing recommendation for Epstein because of how much Epstein had helped the family. And believe it or not, that wasn't even the longest or closest relationship Epstein had with a Rothschild, definitely not the closest. And to unpack this, we really have to understand the Rothschild family, where they came from, how much power and wealth they've accumulated. And I don't want anyone to think that we're getting into like weird conspiracy theories, or that this is going to be some just accusatory thing, like these people are bad, they're taking over the world. No. The Rothschilds alone aren't taking over the world. They are a part of a network that is very, very powerful. And so anyone who has relationships or connections to them will by default be very, very powerful. Just like a lot of the other people and organizations we've talked about, just like the World Economic Forum, just like companies like Meta, you know, they are no different than that, but they are very wealthy. They are very powerful, and there were, once again, a lot of doors that would be opened because of Epstein's association and connections and relationships to the Rothschild family. A lot. Like, I think having that Rothschild connection allowed Epstein to do way more than he would have been able to do before. And there are some members of this family that were more kind of connected or complicit than others. And we are going to talk about all of that, but we can't do it now because we have gotten too far into, I was going to say too far into the weeds. We are in the weeds, but hopefully this video has helped sort of clear things up and kind of once again show you how massive this goes, how big this gets. We've talked about scientists who are focused on, making technology and robots that are going to be smarter and better than us and basically replace us. And we're supposed to be like, yes, watch The Machines versus the Millers. I think it's on Amazon. It's a cartoon movie. But just watch it. It is one of the best movies ever, especially if you have kids, they'll love it. If you don't have kids, you'll love it. Watch that. It's great. If you've seen it already, let me know. There's so many movies I could suggest to you to show you why AGI and AI and everything that the World Economic Forum and all of these people who are supposed to be so much smarter or better than us are suggesting is going to be our future and why it's a good idea. And there's so many movies I could suggest to you to tell you why that wouldn't be the case. But anyways, we will come back next time. The web unravels. It gets worse. It gets more interesting. I have a lot of emails to read to you next time. But anyways, let me know what you thought about this. What do you think about this so far? How are you feeling? Hopefully you're not feeling as hopeless as I've been feeling, because I need you to pull me back from the edge of the cliff. I need you to tell me that, like, hey, it's good that we're talking about this so that we can all be more aware of it and we can all hopefully come together and stop focusing on the things that divide us so that we have a chance of being united when we need to be, which is right about now. We need to be united right about now. All right, let me know what you think. Like this video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already, because more is coming. Thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to talk to you in the comments. But until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.